Chapter 1071. Burning. He was really burning up. His half-step indestructible golden body was burning up under the true phoenix's flames. It could not withstand the flames at all. True phoenix fire. The moment his body started burning, Yi Xian finally panicked. Initially, he thought that his body could withstand the flames. After all, he had a half-step indestructible golden body. However, it turned out that he had severely underestimated the power of the true phoenix fire. The moment his body started burning, Amu frowned slightly. Amu looked at the true phoenix and the latter said calmly, "Do you need to stop?" After a moment of silence, Amu looked at Yi Xian. "Use your bloodline power." Yi Xian nodded. Boom! A powerful red light suddenly shot out from his body and into the sky. Bloodline power. In an instant, Yi Xian was covered in blood. The moment the power of the bloodline appeared, the burning speed of his body suddenly slowed down. But it was still burning. In front of Yi Xian, the true phoenix glanced at Yi Xian in shock. It was very, very rare for someone to be able to withstand her true phoenix fire's bloodline power. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, "How are you now?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "If this goes on, my body will still be burned to ashes." Amu nodded. "Then it's fine." "Fine." Yi Xian looked at Amu and Amu said softly, "To achieve nirvana, you have to bathe in fire. If you want to achieve the indestructible golden body, the time when your body is burnt to ashes is your chance." Yi Xian asked, "Why do you say that?" Amu looked at Yi Xian. "Metamorphosis. Your state of mind and your body need to metamorphose." Yi Xian was silent. Amu turned to look at the true phoenix. The true phoenix was silent. At this moment, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Transformation. His fleshly body had already reached a limit. If he wanted to break through again, he would have to rise from the ashes. However, he did not know how to rise from the ashes. Amu looked at Zhen Feng. "Miss Zhen Feng, let me tell you, he might be your only hope at the moment, because only he dares to accept the karma of the Tendo. If he dies, I'm afraid you will have to continue staying here until the end of the fifth dimension tribulation." The true phoenix sneered. "High Priest, I finally understand. So, it turns out that you're plotting against me. You know that it's impossible for him to achieve the invincible golden body just like that. And the only reason you dared to let him come is because you're sure that I won't let him die, right?" Amu shook his head. "Miss Zhenfeng, we're doing this for mutual benefit, aren't we?" Zhenfeng looked at Amu. "But I don't like being schemed against." Amu shook his head again. "You." After being imprisoned for so many years, he's still so stubborn. The true phoenix was expressionless. "I can't change this temperament." Amu looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's body was disappearing bit by bit. However, the true phoenix remained unmoved. Amu sighed softly. "Miss Zhenfeng, there is a good karma right in front of you. You can pick it up at any time. Do you really not want it?" Zhen Feng looked at Amu. "I said, I don't like being schemed against." Amu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Miss Amu, I can hold on." Amu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. "I can do it." Amu shook his head. "If you didn't have the blood of a true phoenix fusing with you, your body would only be destroyed. You wouldn't be reborn." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Booty don't like to beg others." Amu still wanted to say something. At this moment, the ninth person suddenly said, "Since Miss Zhenfeng doesn't want this good karma, then I do." Mu and Yi Xian were both stunned when they heard what the ninth floor said. Amu looked at Yi Xian's abdomen. "Your Excellency, do you have a way?" The ninth person said, "Perhaps my blood will work as well." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, what blood do you have?" The ninth person chuckled. "Why do you care what blood it is? As long as it works." With that, a mysterious force suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. Soon, a faint red glow appeared on Yi Xian's body. When this faint red glow appeared, although the true phoenix fire on Yi Xian's body was still burning, his body was no longer rotting. It really worked. The three people present were shocked. The true phoenix looked at the faint red glow on Yi Xian's body. "What bloodline is this?" There was a trace of curiosity in Amu's eyes. Yi Xian was even more curious, because he didn't expect that the true phoenix and Amu didn't recognize this bloodline. What the hell was this ninth person? The ninth person laughed. It's a very ordinary bloodline. There's nothing special about it. Everyone, don't pay attention to me. Yi Xian. Amu looked at Yi Xian's abdomen. Your Excellency is really mysterious. The ninth person chuckled and didn't say anything. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Senior, I seriously suspect that you can come out without hurting me. The ninth person said in a low voice. No, I can't come out yet. Really? I swear on my integrity. Yi Xian, at this moment, Amu suddenly said. Calm down and make good use of this true phoenix fire. Yi Xian nodded. He stopped thinking and calmed down. Amu glanced at Yi Xian's abdomen and didn't say anything. The true phoenix didn't say anything either. Time passed bit by bit. Yi Xian's body was already starting to transform bit by bit. The parts of his body that had been burned were growing again, and they were also slowly transforming. It was like he was changing his skin. At the side, Mu raised his head and looked around. No one knew what he was thinking. The true phoenix looked at Amu. Who is he? Amu smiled. Why are you asking? The true phoenix looked straight at Amu. His bloodline is not simple, and he has two godly items in his body. The study and the prison pagoda. At this moment the true phoenix said, most importantly, he has great karma on him. This person is definitely not ordinary. Moreover, as the high priest of the Wu clan, it's not normal for you to choose such a weak person to be a mega servant. Amu nodded. He is indeed not ordinary. As for who he is, I don't know yet. I only know that he is a key point. As for why I chose him, it's because I want to sow great karma. Even if I have a purpose, it's still a good karma. The true phoenix sneered. Having a purpose is also called good karma? Amu asked in return. Why not? Isn't it good for us to help each other? As for the purpose, true phoenix, you really have a good physiognomy. With that, she paused and said, a person like you definitely has no friends. The true phoenix was expressionless. I do have no friends. So what? Amu spread her hands. That's why you've been locked up for so many years and no one has come to save you. Hearing this, the true phoenix flew into a rage. A powerful wave of fire suddenly appeared above her head. Amu smiled. You attack because you can't win an argument? Where's your pride as a powerhouse? The true phoenix looked at Amu. Are you provoking me? Amu shook her head. I don't dare. I can't beat you. The true phoenix just looked at Amu without saying a word. At this moment the ninth floor suddenly said, Miss True Phoenix, I was once very proud. I was condescending and fearless. Only later did I realize how foolish I was. In short, it's better to be humble and low profile. That's the right thing to do. The true phoenix looked at Yi Xian's abdomen. That's why you were locked up. The ninth floor. Amu shook her head and smiled. Ninth floor, how did you get locked up? The ninth floor sighed softly. It's a long story. Let's not talk about it. Amu was about to speak when a powerful force suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body. Rumble. With the appearance of this powerful force, the true phoenix fire on Yi Xian's body suddenly erupted. Ah! A miserable and shrill cry suddenly resounded. Amu looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's skin was rapidly changing. Layers fell off and then grew back. Amu looked at the true phoenix. The true phoenix was expressionless. This is his critical moment. Whether he succeeds or not will depend on himself. Amu nodded. She looked at Yi Xian with a hint of worry in her eyes. About a day later, Yi Xian was in more and more pain. Previously, it was only his body that hurt. But now, he felt as if his bones were hurting. No, it was every part of his body that hurt. It was as if someone was slicing him with a knife. Amu hurriedly said, Hold on a little longer. Soon. Yi Xian said in pain. How much longer? Amu said. Soon. Yi Xian clenched his fists. At this moment, he really felt like he was about to collapse. Amu seemed to have thought of something. She turned to the true phoenix. Give him some true phoenix blood. The true phoenix said indifferently. No. Amu was stunned. Then she said, Miss True Phoenix, it's just a little bit of true phoenix blood. If you give it to him and he gets through this, We will repay you. The true phoenix looked at Amu. I don't like it when others scheme against me. Amu wanted to say something more when Yi Xian suddenly said, It's fine. Amu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. His smile was a little horrifying. Amu, she doesn't owe us anything. Don't ask for anything. I can hold on. Amu looked at Yi Xian. Without the true phoenix blood, you won't be able to hold on. Yi Xian shook his head. I can definitely hold on. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly roared furiously. A powerful force swept out from within him. However, his body was already on the verge of shattering. There was a trace of worry in Amu's eyes. Rebirth wasn't really about destroying Yi Xian's body. Because Yi Xian wasn't a true phoenix and didn't have the special ability to be reborn from the ashes. What he wanted to do was use the true phoenix fire to temper his body and achieve the effects of rebirth. If his body was completely destroyed, then it would truly be over. After a moment of silence, Amu suddenly walked over to Yi Xian. She suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand with her right hand, and in an instant, the powerful true phoenix fire spread to her body. Amu swiftly chanted something. Her body gradually started burning with a faint flame, and this faint flame was resisting the true phoenix fire on her body and Yi Xian's. The true phoenix in the distance narrowed its eyes. Burning your lifespan. You really aren't afraid of death. Chapter 1072. Yi Xian was stunned when he heard this, and then he said, What do you mean by burning one's lifespan? The phoenix spoke indifferently. She's burning her lifespan to resist the energy of the true phoenix flame and allow your body to be in a state of balance with the true phoenix flame. In other words, my flame won't kill you, and it can temper your body instead. Yi Xian's face sank when he heard this, and he hurriedly gazed at Amu. Amu, I can hold on. Stop right now. Amu shook his head. This flame is too overbearing. Your body isn't able to resist it right now. Yi Xian intended to say something when Amu suddenly smiled. If you're really worried about me, then hurry up and attain rebirth. Yi Xian gazed at Amu, and then he closed his eyes slowly. Just like that, this continued for around 2 hours before Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Bang! A powerful force swept out from within Yi Xian, and the powerful true phoenix flame was blasted away. Yi Xian looked at Amu, and he was stunned when he saw Amu. At this moment, Amu's hair was snow white. Amu let go of Yi Xian's hand and smiled. I did it. Yi Xian gazed at Amu. How much lifespan did you burn? Amu shook his head. Not much. Yi Xian was slightly angry. Not much? Not much, and your hair is all white. Amu chuckled. It's just a little bit of lifespan. There's no need for that. Quickly take a look at your body. Yi Xian gazed at the phoenix. How much lifespan did she burn? Amu spoke indifferently. At least 10,000 years. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. An expert at her level can't possibly only have a lifespan of 10,000 years. You've forgotten something. She woke up from a coffin. She should have lived for at least 100,000 years. How long has she been asleep? The man on the 9th floor suddenly spoke up. Yi Xian's face darkened. He looked at Amu. How much lifespan do you have left? Amu smiled and said, A few decades. In any case, it's enough. Yi Xian's expression was a little complicated. Is it worth it? Amu blinked. You are my wizard servant. Let me tell you, when I chose you I was serious. Yi Xian shook his head. Didn't you say you had a purpose? Amu smiled and said, There is a purpose, but I'm also serious. Yi Xian looked at the woman in front of him with mixed feelings. Purpose? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. At this moment, the grudge in his heart suddenly disappeared. Didn't he do many things for a purpose? Didn't 9th floor follow him for a purpose as well? Fu Wanzong and the Worldwide Academy chose him for a purpose as well, didn't they? There were good and bad intentions. In fact, it wasn't just this phoenix who was attracted to his appearance. Yi Xian was also attracted to his appearance. At this moment Amu suddenly said, Look at your body. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked at Amu's head of white hair. Amu blinked. Is it ugly? Yi Xian shook his head. It's very beautiful, really. Amu grinned. It's good that it's beautiful. In any case, in the Wu clan, no one would dare say that I'm not beautiful. Yi Xian smiled and looked down at his body. At this moment, his body had already undergone nirvana. Indestructible golden body. After reaching this level, he felt that his body had undergone a substantial change. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, "If your current body is compared to the heavenly dragon race, it is only inferior to the 8-division heavenly dragon. As for the rest of the heavenly dragons, kill as many as you can." Yi Xian nodded. He seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Is there a realm above the indestructible golden body?" Amu was silent. Yi Xian said, "What is it?" The true phoenix suddenly said, "There is another realm above the indestructible golden body. However, it is only a legend." Yi Xian asked, "What realm?" The true phoenix said calmly, "Mortal body." Yi Xian frowned, "Mortal body?" Amu, who was at the side, said, "Yes, above the indestructible golden body is the body of a mortal. However, even in the history of my witch clan and Tian clan, there has never been an expert of this level. It can be said that this kind of existence only belongs to legends." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but the true phoenix suddenly said, "It's time for you to fulfill your promise." Yi Xian looked at the true phoenix, who waved the iron chain in his hand. Yi Xian opened his palm and the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. He looked at the true phoenix and said, "Miss True Phoenix, I will help you escape. After this, we will write off all our debts." The true phoenix looked at Yi Xian. "Sure." Yi Xian nodded. Just as he was about to attack with the executing heaven sword in his hand, the distant horizon suddenly trembled violently. Immediately after, a black cloud appeared in the middle of the blazing area. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned, and then his expression changed. This Tendo couldn't have appeared, right? At this moment, the true phoenix's expression also became extremely ugly. Amu walked to Yi Xian's side and hugged Yi Xian's arm with both hands. "Tendo, that guy is here." Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. "Are you afraid?" Amu nodded. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. With the appearance of the black cloud, the surrounding flames suddenly dispersed in all directions. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Tendo won't hit me, right?" Amu blinked and then said, "It's possible." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and felt a little like slipping away. Because he really couldn't beat Tendo. Although he now had the indestructible golden body and could even take a few blows from arrow, he didn't have the confidence to face this Tendo. A Tendo that could make countless experts fear him was absolutely extraordinarily strong. Right at this moment, the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly floated up. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. He tried to recall the executing heaven sword, but it was useless. At this moment, the executing heaven sword wasn't under his control. The true phoenix stared fixedly at the executing heaven sword. "Are you finally going to kill me?" Meanwhile, the executing heaven sword descended. It didn't kill the true phoenix. The sword arrived directly between Yi Xian's brows and just pressed against Yi Xian's forehead. All the spectators were stunned when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian blinked and said, "Let's talk it out." There was no response. Yi Xian broke out in cold sweat. "What's this Tendo doing?" Meanwhile, Xiao Ling suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Xiao Ling gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Big brother, someone said that she's giving you face. Let her go." Yi Xian was slightly stunned. "What?" Xiao Ling rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. "A voice resounded in my mind just now. She said that she owes you a favor in exchange for letting her go." Yi Xian was still slightly stunned. Meanwhile, Amu said abruptly, "It's the Tendo." "The Tendo." Yi Xian shuddered. He squatted down and looked at Xiao Ling. "The Tendo is communicating with you?" Xiao Ling blinked. "I don't know. In any case, she wants you to let her go." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Help me ask her why she doesn't let her go herself." Xiao Ling shook her head. "I don't know where she is." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Amu suddenly said, "The Tendo is doing you a favor." Yi Xian looked at Amu, and Amu said solemnly, "She wants you to owe her a favor. Since she's expressing goodwill, don't refuse." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and nodded. He looked up at the dark clouds in the sky and said, "Your Excellency, I'll remember this favor. I'll definitely repay it in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. He walked up to the true phoenix and slashed down. Boom! All the chains on the true phoenix's body were directly severed by the executing heaven sword. At the same time, a mysterious force suddenly disappeared around the true phoenix. Yi Xian pulled a mu and retreated far away. In the distance, the true phoenix took a deep breath, and then she suddenly howled furiously. A strand of flames shot into the sky and into the depths of the starry sky. In an instant, the entire starry sky was set ablaze. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. Even though this woman doesn't have a physical body, she's still really strong. A short moment later, the true phoenix suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Yi Xian. Even the Tendo gave you face. You're really extraordinary. Yi Xian shook his head. I'm just an ordinary swordsman. The true phoenix gazed at Yi Xian and remained silent. Yi Xian smiled. Miss True Phoenix, you helped me break through, and I helped you escape. We're even. The true phoenix spoke indifferently. Even. Yi Xian nodded, and then he left with a moo. The true phoenix looked up at the dark clouds in the sky, and a vicious expression flashed through her eyes. Just you wait. With that, she turned around to leave. But at this moment, the dark clouds in the sky suddenly trembled violently. The next moment, a bolt of divine lightning suddenly fell from the sky. Seeing this, Yi Xian and Amu were both stunned. What the hell was this? The true phoenix was also stunned, and at this moment, the divine lightning had already fallen. The true phoenix roared furiously, and a column of flames shot into the sky. However, this powerful flame had only just touched the divine spirit when it dissipated. Soon, under the watchful eyes of Yi Xian and Amu, the divine spirit directly smashed into the true phoenix. Boom! The flames around the true phoenix disappeared without a trace, and the divine lightning did not disappear either. It was like a cage that imprisoned the true phoenix. It was imprisoned again. Yi Xian and Amu were dumbfounded. What was going on? Inside the divine lightning, the true phoenix roared, Tendo! Kill me if you can. Kill me. Ah, ah. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky were slowly disappearing. Within the cage, the true phoenix was still howling hysterically. She howled madly, but Tendo did not respond at all. Next to Yi Xian, Amu shook his head and sighed. No one knew what he was thinking. The ninth person sighed softly as well. What do you mean you wouldn't have died if you didn't seek death? If you had kept a low profile, you wouldn't have ended up like this. Yi Xian nodded. He didn't say anything else, and he just pulled Amu along as he turned around and left. At this moment, the distant true phoenix suddenly roared angrily. Stop right there. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the true phoenix. Senior. The true phoenix stared at Yi Xian. Save me. Yi Xian said solemnly. Senior, we're even. With that, she turned around and left. The true phoenix suddenly said, I owe you a favor. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks and said, If you had given me a drop of true phoenix blood earlier, I would have owed you a favor, and Amu wouldn't have ended up like this. Of course, this is your right, and I don't blame you for anything. But now, Senior True Phoenix, forgive me for being blunt, but I don't owe you anything. With that, he pulled Amu along and left. P.S. Many people in my hometown are still visiting. I realize that the people in my hometown don't care about this epidemic at all. They go out to play cards every day, and they even gather on the mountain roads. I don't understand at all. Chapter 1073. Watching Yi Xian leave with Amu, the true phoenix roared furiously behind them. However, Yi Xian did not look back. As Yi Xian had said, he did not owe the true phoenix anything. After leaving True Phoenix Mountain, Amu, who was standing beside Yi Xian, said softly, This woman is too arrogant. Jiuren said, It's not arrogance, I think it's stupidity. Amu shook her head and sighed. Jiuren said, Tell me, she clearly can't beat the Tendo, but she still spoke so harshly. Isn't she looking for death? Can't she just admit defeat if she can't beat him? What a retard. Yi Xian nodded. He had not expected that the true phoenix, who had just been released, would be imprisoned again. The Tendo had the ability to kill her but did not. It was obvious that he wanted to imprison her. The loss of freedom was often more terrifying than death. Amu suddenly said, Actually, you can save her and form a good relationship with her. Yi Xian shook his head. This woman is arrogant and I don't get along with her. It's better not to form a good relationship with her. Otherwise, I'm afraid this good relationship will turn into a bad one. On the contrary, I think the Tendo is not bad. There's no need to offend the Tendo for this woman. After all, she has already done me a favor. If I don't know my limits, the good relationship between me and the Tendo will be gone. Amu nodded lightly. You're right. As she spoke, she turned to look at the true Phoenix Mountain below and shook her head. Not only did she harm herself, but she also harmed the entire true Phoenix clan. Even now, she still doesn't repent. She's really hopeless. At this point, she seemed to have thought of something and turned to look at Yi Xian. Isn't it said that swordsmen are arrogant and would rather break than bend? Why do I feel that you're quite flexible? Zhou Ren suddenly said. He's a shameless swordsman. Yi Xian. Amu covered her mouth and laughed. You're really thick-skinned. However, this is a good thing. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Just as he was about to speak, a powerful dragon might suddenly appeared in the distant sky. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian frowned. He and Amu looked up. In the depths of the starry sky, a huge dragon soared over. Wherever the dragon passed, the entire starry sky trembled. Amu suddenly said, This is a 5-division heavenly dragon. In the heavenly dragon race, his position should not be low. Yi Xian nodded and said nothing. Soon, the 5 groups of heavenly dragons arrived above Yi Xian and Amu. The 5 groups of heavenly dragons looked down at Yi Xian. Human! How dare you! At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly soared into the sky. Before the 5-division heavenly dragon could react, its abdomen was pierced by a beam of sword light. Pest! A stream of dragon blood shot into the sky. At the same time, a scream suddenly resounded in the starry sky. At that moment, another beam of sword light suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Soon, the dragon's head was directly thrown out of the starry sky. Instant kill. With the current him and the strengthened version of the executing heaven sword, such a dragon was like an ant before him. Yi Xian returned to Amu's side. He took out a large pot and said, Dragon stew. Amu blinked. Yi Xian was not joking. He immediately began to dissect the 5 groups of heavenly dragons. Soon, the fragrant smell of dragon meat wafted from his pot. Amu picked up a dragon tendon and said with some intoxication, It's really delicious. I never ate like this when I was in the Wu clan. Eating dragon meat every day is really exciting. After saying that, she placed the dragon tendon in her mouth and chewed it. Her face was full of excitement. Yi Xian picked up a piece of dragon meat and put it into his mouth. Then he said, Amu, tell me about the division of forces in your era. Amu nodded. In our era, the 2 strongest clans were the Sky Clan and the Wu Clan. The Sky Clan was formed by the 100 Clan Alliance. The stronger clans were the Deity Clan, the Underworld Clan, and the Guxing Clan. The Deity Clan controlled the Heaven Realm and was extremely powerful. The Heavenly Dragon Clan was their mount and was the most loyal subordinate clan of the Heavenly Dragon Clan. The Underworld Clan controlled the Underworld. If the dead did not want to be reincarnated, they would join them. At this point she paused for a moment before she continued. There's an extraordinary expert in the underworld called Abu Zong. He's very strong, but fortunately, he basically doesn't get involved in the matters between the Heavenly Clan and the Netherworld Clan. Otherwise, the strength of the Underworld Clan would be above that of the Deity Clan. As for the Guxing Clan, there were very few of them. There were only a few dozen of them. However, they were really good at fighting. Yi Xian was a little curious. They were good at fighting? Amu nodded slightly. The combat strength of these few dozen people was very heaven-defying. If they had more people, the Underworld Clan and the Sky Clan would not be enough. Unfortunately, they were few in number. Moreover, their fertility was very low. After tens of thousands of years they might only have a dozen more people. Yi Xian frowned slightly. How could it be so bad? Amu shook her head. The heavens gave them unique combat talents, but they also took away some of their abilities. Otherwise, if they had tens of thousands of people, I'm afraid even the Tendo would be killed by them. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he asked again, The Heavenly Dragon Clan is a subordinate clan of the Deity Clan? Amu nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was a little confused. Aren't the Heavenly Dragons very arrogant? Amu rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. That depends on who they are in front of. In front of ordinary people, they are extremely arrogant. However, in front of a race that is stronger than them, they are as lowly as a puppy. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. In other words, the Heavenly Dragon Clan is not especially strong in the Sky Clan? Amu nodded. Yes. Not strong. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. I stewed the Heavenly Dragon Clan's dragon. I will definitely not rest until the Heavenly Dragon Clan is dead. Under such circumstances, the Deity Clan will definitely help the Heavenly Dragon Clan, right? Amu nodded again. Yes. You have to look at the owner before beating a dog. Moreover, you are not beating, you are stewing. You are stewing the Deity Clan's face. Also, let me tell you, the Sky Clan is of the same breath. Underworld and the ancient Xing Clan will definitely help the Heavenly Dragon Clan. Once they wake up, you will be finished. Yi Xian was speechless. Amu picked up a piece of dragon meat and put it into her mouth. Then she said, however, you don't have to be afraid. Because you are my servant, I will protect you. Yi Xian looked at Amu. What about the Wu clan? Since the Wu clan can fight against the Sky Clan, they must not be weak, right? Amu put down her chopsticks. She looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, of course not. Let me tell you, the Wu clan has 36 god shamans, 12 super shamans, 3 great shamans, and the witch god. Other than that, we have 81 tribes. The warriors of each tribe are very strong, especially our Jiuli tribe. Even if we encounter the ancient Xing clan, we are not inferior. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression relaxed slightly. Fortunately, the Wu clan was so weak. Otherwise, he would really have to hide in the four-dimensional universe. Amu suddenly said, what's the name of the lady in the plain dress behind us? Yi Xian blinked. Us. Amu looked at Yi Xian. Not us. Yi Xian nodded. Yes, it's us. I don't know what her name is. I only know that she is very strong. Amu nodded slightly. She is very strong. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. You must reach the rebirth realm. No, you must reach the ruler realm. Your realm is too low. Although your body is strong, if your realm cannot keep up, you can only passively take a beating when you fight against a true elite. Yi Xian nodded. Let's go to the boundless underground city. Amu nodded. She stood up. Let's go. While the elites of the Sky Clan and the Heavenly Dragon Tribe have not woken up, we have to go to the tomb and increase your realm. As she said this, the two kept the cauldron and disappeared into space. Boundless Underground City. Yi Xian and Amu had just returned to the boundless underground city when the tomb guard old man appeared in front of them. The tomb guard old man looked at Yi Xian and sighed. Why are you here again? Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. Greetings, Senior. The tomb guard old man shook his head. I'm not good. Yi Xian. The tomb guard old man looked at Yi Xian. Young man, can you change the place? Yi Xian's face darkened. Senior. You also know that it was the Heavenly Dragon Tribe who made the first move. The tomb guard old man shook his head and sighed. Without saying anything else, he turned and left. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Do you know who he is? He was also curious about the tomb guard old man's identity. Amu looked at the back of the tomb guard old man in the distance and said, I only know that he does not help the Sky Clan or the Wu Clan. He is neutral. As for his true identity, I'm not too sure either. Yi Xian was a little surprised. Even you don't know? Amu nodded. It's mainly because I haven't investigated. Yi Xian nodded. Forget about him. Let's go to the grave. With that, he disappeared with Amu. After a while, Yi Xian brought Amu to the tomb. Just as Yi Xian was about to enter, Amu suddenly stopped him. Amu looked at the tomb and frowned. Yi Xian looked at Amu. What's wrong? Amu said solemnly, We've been ambushed. Just as she finished speaking, a laugh suddenly sounded from the side, as expected of the high priest of the Wu clan. As the voice faded, a middle-aged man suddenly walked out from the side. And around Yi Xian and Amu, there were more than 10 experts. These experts appeared without a sound. It was very strange. Yi Xian frowned. Heavenly Dragon Race? Amu shook her head. They're not from the Heavenly Dragon Race. Not the Heavenly Dragon Race. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, We're not from the heavenly dragon race. We're from the night clan. Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. Amu said softly, a small clan of the Sky Clan. Their level is even lower than the heavenly dragon race. Yi Xian said, do they have enmity with you? Amu nodded. They definitely want to capture me to take credit for the deity race. Yi Xian turned to look at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man smiled and said, the high priest guessed correctly. With that, he looked at Yi Xian. Are you going to commit suicide, or do you want me to do it? Amu approached Yi Xian. He's weaker than the first dragon you stewed. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he said, then why is he so arrogant? Amu thought about it and pointed at her head. He might be retarded. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1074. When he heard Amu's words, the middle-aged man's eyes flashed with a trace of darkness. He was about to attack when Yi Xian disappeared. Chi! Before the middle-aged man could react, his head flew off. Almost at the same time, the heads of the experts around Yi Xian and Amu also flew off. Instant kill. Yi Xian's physical body had reached the indestructible golden body realm. It could be said that even an ordinary sovereign realm expert was no match for him. Moreover, sovereigns weren't as common as dogs in this fiend god era. Amu looked at the corpses on the ground and shook her head. Then she looked at the grave in front of her. Yi Xian said, Miss Amu, should I go in now? Amu shook her head. No, you won't be able to cultivate in peace if you go in now. Yi Xian said solemnly. Then what should we do? Amu thought for a moment and said, we'll take the grave away. Take it away. Yi Xian was shocked. I can take it away? Amu nodded. You can take the grave away. Put the grave in your Xiao Ta. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and looked at the grave. He opened his right hand and pressed it lightly. However, a powerful force swept out from the grave. Boom! Yi Xian took several steps back. Yi Xian looked at Amu. It doesn't seem willing to go with me. Amu said after a moment of silence. Hit it. Yi Xian blinked. Hit it. Amu nodded. Hit it hard. Yi Xian hesitated and said, that's not good, right? Amu said, if you have it, many of your friends can quickly reach the rebirth realm. Yi Xian said solemnly, Amu, didn't you say it belongs to the Wu clan? You are the high priest. Can't you let it go with you? Amu blinked. Actually, it belongs to the underworld. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Then why did you say it belonged to the Wu clan? Amu grinned. If you snatch it away now, won't it be ours? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Was this even possible? Amu said again, the underworld belongs to the Celestials. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, we'll borrow it for now, and we'll return it to the Nether race when the time comes. What do you think? Amu quickly nodded. I think it's fine. Yi Xian turned his head and looked at the grave. He directly rushed out and punched the grave. Boom! The tomb shook violently from Yi Xian's punch. However, the tomb didn't just sit there and wait for death. It resisted crazily. However, it wasn't a match for Yi Xian at all. A moment later, the tomb was kept into the prison pagoda by Yi Xian. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian turned his head to look at Amu. Do you know of any other treasures? Amu nodded. I know. However, it's a little dangerous. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, are the treasures good? Amu looked at Yi Xian. The divine spirit race's tree of origin. That tree is very, very precious. If we can get it, Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what's the use? Amu said, the tree of origin has the power of origin. This power of origin can endlessly repair the body. If you add it to your indestructible golden body, let me tell you, even the 8 groups of heavenly beings can't kill you. Most importantly, the tree of origin is a spirit vein, a super spirit vein. If you have the tree of origin, your cultivation speed and that of the people around you will increase by at least 10 times. Dozens of times. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. This was a little heaven-defying. Amu continued, you have to understand one thing. Even if you don't stew the heavenly dragon race, the heavenly dragon race and the heavenly dragon race will not let you go. Just like the Night Ghost clan just now, why do they want to kill you? Because it's very simple. You're with me. Furthermore, you are my witch attendant. From the moment you chose to be my witch attendant, the Tian clan was right in front of you. If you were the divine attendant of the Tian clan's divine master, my Wu clan would kill you at all costs. As she spoke, she paused for a moment, then continued, Position. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Amu nodded slightly. You are a kind person in your heart, and you are ruthless and decisive in your actions, but it's not enough. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. You are the first person to say that I am kind. As he spoke, he looked into the distance. Let's go take a look at the tree of origin? Amu blinked. All right. I'll lead the way. With that, she walked behind Yi Xian, lay on Yi Xian's back, and pointed to the front. Go that way. Yi Xian disappeared from where he stood. On the way, Yi Xian said, Miss Amu, can't you fly? Amu said, Yes. But it consumes energy. Furthermore, I'm not as fast as you. Yi Xian nodded. Previously, when he was being chased, he carried Amu on his back and didn't have any other thoughts. But now, Amu's body was tightly pressed against his back. That feeling. Soft, fragrant. Yi Xian abandoned all distracting thoughts and increased his speed. On the way, Amu suddenly said, Let me calculate what will happen next. Because you stewed a few heavenly dragons, the heavenly dragon race will definitely not let you off. When their more powerful heavenly dragons wake up, they will definitely kill you at all costs. And the heavenly dragon race is a subsidiary race of the deity race. If the heavenly dragon race can't beat you, the deity race will definitely attack. And if the deity race can't kill you, they will definitely summon the underworld and the Guxing race to kill you together. So, you must be mentally prepared. Yi Xian was speechless. Amu said again, I almost forgot one thing. You are my servant. Because of this identity, it can be said that the heavenly race will not let you off. Next you might have to escape. Great escape. Yi Xian shook his head. Amu, you're making me panic. Amu smiled. It's fine. If the Wu clan's experts wake up, you'll be safe. Yi Xian nodded slightly. His top priority now was to increase his strength as soon as possible. But fortunately, he had the indestructible golden body. He was not afraid of ordinary experts, unless they were at the top level. Thinking of this, he sped up. About 2 hours later, Amu suddenly said, We have entered the former deity race's territory. There might be experts from the deity race here. We must be careful. Yi Xian nodded. He glanced around. It was cold and deserted. There was no one around. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Amu, can you feel the experts from the deity race? Amu looked around and shook her head. I can't feel anything. Maybe they haven't woken up yet. This is our chance. As she spoke, she pointed to the right. Take it there. Yi Xian nodded and sped up. Amu curiously sized up the surroundings. This is the first time I've swaggered into the deity race. Yi Xian did not speak. He sped up, and soon, he arrived at a river. In the middle of the river stood a towering tree. This tree pierced through the clouds, blocking out the sun and the sky. The divine tree of origin. Amu looked at the divine tree of origin and exclaimed, As expected of the deity race's treasure. Yi Xian looked around. It was very quiet. Amu said, Put it in your pagoda. Yi Xian nodded. He walked to the divine tree of origin and sized it up. Then he said, Amu, why is the spiritual energy here the same as other places? Amu said, Because it hasn't woken up yet. This is the best time for us to take it away. Yi Xian nodded and took out the prison pagoda. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from behind. Yi Xian frowned. He and Amu turned to look. Not far in front of them stood a middle-aged man in golden armor. In the middle-aged man's hand was a huge golden sword. Amu said, A divine general of the deity race. As she spoke, she sized up the divine general and said, He should be one of the 6 divine generals of the deity race, Ma Yingxin. Yi Xian looked at the huge golden sword in the divine general's hand and said, Is he swordsman? Amu nodded. Yes. At this moment, Ma Yingxin suddenly said, The high priest of the Wu clan. Amu blinked and said, Yes. Ma Yingxin stared at Amu. Your Excellency, you're quite daring to come to my deity race. Amu grinned. I'm just here to take a look. I don't have any other intentions. Ma Yingxin glanced at the divine tree of origin and said, I think your excellency's true objective is this divine tree of origin. The high priest blinked and said, Yes. Yi Xian was speechless. Ma Yingxin looked at the high priest and said with a smile, If the high priest has the ability, you can take it away. I won't stop you. Mu was stunned and then he said, Is that true? Ma Yingxin nodded. Yes. As long as the high priest can take it away, I won't stop you. Mu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated and said, Since your excellency has said so, I won't hold back. With that said, he looked at the divine tree of origin with the prison pagoda and shone it. Come. Boom. A powerful force enveloped the divine tree of origin. However, the divine tree of origin didn't move at all. Yi Xian frowned slightly. There's no movement? Yi Xian gazed at Mu. Mu spoke solemnly. You have to make it go with you. Yi Xian was speechless. How could I possibly make it go with me? As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian said, Why don't we attack it? Mu hesitated for a moment and said, You might not be able to defeat it. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, a wisp of disdain curled up on the corners of Divine General Ma Yingxin's mouth. Are all of you even worthy of possessing this divine tree? Yi Xian was about to speak when Xiao Ling suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Xiao Ling glanced at the divine tree and said, Big brother, I want this tree. Yi Xian blinked and said, Can you make it go with us? Xiao Ling looked at the divine tree of origin and said, Do you want to go with me? The divine tree of origin didn't respond. Yi Xian's expression darkened. At this moment, Xiao Ling suddenly took out a box and patted it lightly. White. The box trembled and opened. Immediately after, a white light shone out from the box, and within that white light, a furry little fellow silently condensed. Yi Xian was speechless. In the faraway graveyard, the old man who was sweeping the grave suddenly stopped and turned to look in the direction of the deity race. His eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? Why did this bandit appear again? His voice was trembling slightly. P.S. Thank you for your recent donations and votes. Everyone, please be rational. I'm not trying to trick you. It's true. Everyone, please be rational. I watch unorthodox female streamers every day and never give them any donations. Chapter 1075. As soon as the little white fellow appeared, Xiao Dao, who was sleeping on the counter in the Boundless City's pawnshop, suddenly raised her head, and then she vanished in the next moment. Yi Xian and Mu's gazes descended onto the little white fellow in front of the divine tree of origin. Mu's eyes were filled with astonishment. No, it was astonishment. Yi Xian was quite shocked as well. He hadn't expected that the little fellow would actually appear here. However, it didn't take long for him to realize that the little fellow wasn't in her true form, but a projection. Could a projection deal with the divine tree of origin? A wisp of disdain arose on the corners of the godly general's mouth as he gazed at the little white fellow. I was wondering what it was. So it's just a spirit. Yi Xian glanced at Bai Xian. She's no ordinary spirit. Bai Xian's face remained expressionless. Is that so? Then why don't you show me? Yi Xian paid no further attention to Bai Xian, and he gazed at the little white fellow instead. The little white fellow suddenly turned around to look at Xiao Ling and she grinned when she saw Xiao Ling Meanwhile, Xiao Ling took out a candied fruit and passed it to her. The little white fellow's eyes lit up, and then she grabbed the candied fruit and licked it. After that, a wisp of an intoxicated expression appeared on her face. Meanwhile, Xiao Ling pointed at the divine tree of origin in the distance. The little white fellow blinked, and then turned around to look at the divine tree of origin. Xiao Ling pointed at the divine tree of origin and said, Bai, he said that if we can take it away, then the tree will belong to us. You have a way, right? The little white fellow gazed at the tree, and then she waved her little claw. The tree didn't react. Yi Xian was speechless. The little white fellow blinked, and then she inhaled. As soon as she did, the tree trembled violently, and then it instantly became illusory. The divine general in the distance was stunned by the sight of this. Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. She could not help but pull Yi Xian's arm, her voice trembling. She? Where did she come from? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know where she came from. Meanwhile, the little white fellow suddenly waved at the divine tree of origin again. The divine tree of origin suddenly trembled as if it was responding to something. No one knew what the divine tree of origin said, but the little white fellow suddenly frowned. At the side, Yi Xian quickly asked Xiao Linger, what are they talking about? Xiao Linger pointed at the divine tree of origin and said, that tree said that it owes some deity a favor, so it has to guard this place and can't leave. Yi Xian turned to look at Amu, and Amu said softly, it should be the first god. He was the one who brought this tree here. Suddenly, the little white fellow waved its claw, and a strand of dark violet energy floated towards the divine tree of origin. In an instant, the entire divine tree of origin started to tremble violently, and then strands of powerful aura swept out incessantly from the tree. Amu suddenly exclaimed, It's breaking through! Breaking through! Yi Xian looked at the divine tree of origin with an astonished expression. The tree is about to break through with a single wave of its claw? What kind of heaven-defying operation is this? The little white fellow licked the candied fruit in its claw. Right when the tree's aura had reached a peak, the little white fellow waved its claw, and the violet energy on the divine tree of origin vanished without a trace. At the same time, the powerful aura on the divine tree of origin vanished without a trace as well. It's back to normal. It's not breaking through. Yi Xian and Amu were stunned. The divine tree of origin was stunned for a moment, and then it started to tremble violently as if it was trying to express something. Amu and Yi Xian gazed at Xiao Linger, and the latter said, it's said to give it violet energy. Yi Xian hurriedly said, let it go with us. Xiao Linger walked over to the little white fellow, pointed at the divine tree of origin, and then pointed at Yi Xian. Its meaning was very obvious. The white little creature threw Yi Xian a look. Yi Xian hurried to take out a stick of candied hawthorn and give it to the white little creature. The white little creature grinned. Then she put the candied hawthorn away. Then she turned around to look at the divine tree. Then she started to wave her little claws at high speed. At this moment, the divine tree suddenly trembled as if it was trying to say something. Yi Xian and Amu looked at Xiao Linger, but Xiao Linger didn't say anything and only looked at the divine tree of origin. At this moment, the divine tree of origin trembled, and then a powerful and mysterious force swept toward the little white fellow. Seeing this, Yi Xian and Amu were stunned. What is this divine tree of origin trying to do? Xiao Linger suddenly said, it wants to snatch the violet energy by force. Snatch it by force. Yi Xian was shocked. The executing heaven sword was already in his hand, and just as he was about to make a move, the little white fellow suddenly sucked in a breath of air. In an instant, the divine tree of origin became illusory, and at the same time, the spiritual chi on its body was dissipating at an extremely fast speed. Amu suddenly said in a trembling voice, the divine tree of origin's divine power of origin is dissipating at an extremely fast speed. Meanwhile, the divine tree of origin suddenly let out a wave of strange and trembling cries. Xiao Linger suddenly said, it's begging for mercy. Yi Xian and Amu exchanged glances. Begging for mercy. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, the divine general suddenly roared furiously. How dare you! As soon as he finished speaking, the huge sword in his hand suddenly flew forward, and then a powerful ray of light flashed and slashed towards the little white fellow. Yi Xian's expression changed, and he was about to act when the huge sword suddenly stopped moving. The huge sword was blocked by a small hand that was as white as jade. Xiao Dao! Yi Xian was quite surprised to see Xiao Dao suddenly appear in front of him. He hadn't expected Xiao Dao to actually show up here. Xiao Dao stopped the huge sword with her right hand while her gaze was fixed on the little white fellow, and the little white fellow's gaze was fixed on the trembling divine tree of origin. Suddenly, she raised her little claw, and the divine tree of origin trembled violently before transforming into a ray of green light that entered Yi Xian's stomach. They've entered the pagoda. Yi Xian and Amu exchanged a glance, and then Amu blinked. They've entered. Yi Xian nodded. They've entered. Divine General Xueqi's expression instantly changed drastically when he saw the divine tree of origin vanish. How dare you! As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Xiao Daoist. He grabbed the enormous sword and suddenly pushed it forward. However, Xiao Daoist stood on the spot without moving at all. Xueqi was stunned. Meanwhile, Xiao Dao suddenly slapped him. Bang! Mengxin was directly slapped hundreds of meters away. After he blasted Xueqi flying, Xiao Dao turned around to gaze at the little white fellow. The little white fellow blinked, and then she gazed at Xiao Ling. She waved her little claw lightly and bid her farewell. I'm leaving. Xiao Ling walked over to the little white fellow and said softly, Are you leaving? The little white fellow nodded. She seemed to have thought of something, and she waved her little claw lightly at Xiao Ling. In an instant, countless strands of violet energy enveloped Xiao Ling. Bang! Xiao Ling's entire body trembled, and then her aura suddenly rose explosively. Xiao Dao's eyes narrowed slightly when she witnessed this scene, and there was a trace of a strange expression in her eyes. Suddenly, Divine General Xueqi roared furiously, Hand over the divine tree. Xiao Dao turned around to look at Xueqi. Xueqi's expression changed when he saw Xiao Dao look over at him. Who are you? Xiao Dao paid no attention to Xueqi, and he turned around to look at Yi Xian instead. Help me get some violet energy from her. Consider it as doing me a favor. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he nodded. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked over to the little white fellow, withdrew a stick of candied fruit, and passed it to her. The little white fellow grinned and received it. Yi Xian spoke softly. Can you give my friend some violet energy? As he spoke, he pointed at Xiao Dao. The little white fellow looked at Xiao Dao, and she frowned when she saw Xiao Dao. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, What's wrong? The little white fellow pointed at Xiao Dao, and then she quickly waved her little claws. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ling. At this moment, Xiao Ling's eyes were closed tightly, and she seemed to be on the verge of breaking through. Meanwhile, Xiao Dao suddenly spoke, Your Excellency, it was my mistake in the past, please forgive me. As soon as she finished speaking, she bowed slightly to the little white fellow. The little white fellow blinked, and then she looked at Yi Xian. She waved her little claws, and a ball of dark violet energy descended in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the little white fellow. Thank you. The little fellow grinned, and then she continued to lick the candied fruit. Yi Xian took the ball of dark violet energy, turned around, and walked over to Xiao Dao. He gave all the violet energy to Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Thank you. As soon as she finished speaking, she withdrew the violet energy. Meanwhile, the little white fellow's figure suddenly turned illusory, and she was on the verge of vanishing. Divine General Xueqi's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. At this moment, he couldn't be bothered about anything else, and he immediately charged at the little white fellow. Yi Xian frowned, and he was about to attack. However, Xiao Dao was faster than him, and she slapped him away before he could even react. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Xiao Dao is really strong. Xiao Dao gazed at Divine General Xueqi who'd fallen to the ground. I'll kill you if you attack again. Divine General Xueqi spoke fiercely. Do you know where this is? This is the Divine Spirit Clan. Xiao Dao's face was expressionless, and she didn't even pay any attention to him. She turned around to look at the little white fellow instead. The little white fellow blinked, and then she suddenly floated over to Yi Xian and entered Yi Xian's body. At the same time, Xiao Ling vanished on the spot. She's entered the pagoda. Yi Xian immersed his consciousness into his body. The little white fellow had arrived at the 3rd floor, and then she floated over to the heaven-warring beast. The latter hurriedly lay flat on the ground and trembled lightly. Submit. The little white fellow opened her mouth slightly, and then a ball of violet energy entered the heaven-warring beast's body. Bang! In an instant, the heaven-warring beast started to tremble, and then its entire body actually started to grow rapidly. Outside the pagoda, Divine General Xueqi suddenly roared furiously, All of you deserve death. With that, he took out a golden arrow and threw it. The golden arrow flew straight into the graveyard. A short while later, numerous formidable auras swept out from the tomb. Amu's voice suddenly trembled when he saw this scene. Many experts of the celestial race are about to awaken. Let's run. Yi Xian nodded. Meanwhile, a voice resounded from afar. Run? How laughable. Hearing this, Amu stopped and looked at Yi Xian. We can't escape. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao had his hands clasped behind his back, and his gaze was indifferent as he looked in the direction of the tomb. Why should we escape? It's just a mere celestial race. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly felt that Xiao Dao was somewhat unfamiliar. Chapter 1076. Yi Xian nudged Amu with his elbow and asked, "Do you know her?" Xiao Dao. He was really curious about this woman. This woman's identity was really mysterious. Amu glanced at Xiao Dao and shook his head. "I only know that she has lived for a very long time. As for who she really is, I don't know." Yi Xian nodded slightly and looked at Xiao Dao. He could see that Xiao Dao was a little angry at the moment. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared on the horizon. He wore a wide golden armor and held a black xiaotar in his hand. His body emitted a formless pressure. Amu suddenly said, "One of the 6 great generals of the deity race, the Pagoda King." Yi Xian glanced at the xiaotar in the Pagoda King's hand and said, "His pagoda or mine, whose is better?" Amu looked at Yi Xian and smiled mischievously. "Yours." Yi Xian laughed mischievously and looked at Xiao Dao. Although more and more experts of the deity race were awakening, he didn't panic at all. Because he had Xiao Dao. With this woman at the front, he felt very safe. In the distance, the Pagoda King glanced at Xueqi and frowned. "Where's the divine tree?" Xueqi pointed at Yi Xian angrily. "It's already been stolen by this person." Yi Xian suddenly said, Hey, you can't say that. Who was the one who told me to take it myself? You said it, right? You said that as long as I have the ability to take it, the divine tree will be mine." Xueqi stared at Yi Xian, speechless. He really didn't expect that white fellow to take the divine tree away. One had to know that the origin god tree was the deity race's treasure. It had existed for countless years and was a symbol of the deity race. Moreover, the origin god tree's loyalty to the deity race was unquestionable. However, it was taken away by that white fellow just like that. At this moment, Xueqi was both shocked and furious. At this moment, another group of experts from the deity race appeared behind the Pagoda King. It had to be said that these experts from the deity race were indeed very strong because there were many at the rebirth realm. Although there weren't any sovereign realm experts roaming the streets like dogs, there were quite a number of Samsara realm experts. The Pagoda Emperor looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian immediately pulled a move and walked behind Xiao Dao. The Pagoda Emperor's gaze fell on Xiao Dao. He looked at Xiao Dao with a solemn expression. "You're that Xiao Dao lady." Xiao Dao smiled and said, "It's me." The Pagoda King said in a deep voice, "Miss Xiao Dao, my deity race has no enmity with you. Why are you helping this youth?" Xiao Dao smiled and said, "Today, I'm going to take him away. If you're willing to let me take him away, I won't interfere in your matters in the future." "If you're not willing," the Pagoda King suddenly said, "Miss Xiao Dao, I'm telling you very clearly. My deity race will take this youth's life. No one can protect him." At this moment, Xiao Dao suddenly disappeared on the spot. The Pagoda King's expression changed. The pagoda in his hand suddenly transformed into a golden light and flew out. He quickly chanted an incantation and the pagoda quickly transformed into a few thousand meters tall. Then, it smashed down on Xiao Dao's head. Below, Xiao Dao opened her palm and a red needle shot into the sky. Boom! The pagoda was directly held up in the sky by the tiny red needle and was unable to descend. A trace of viciousness flashed through the Pagoda King's eyes. Pagoda suppresses mountains and rivers. As soon as he finished speaking, a resplendent golden light suddenly erupted from the pagoda. However, as Amu pointed with her finger, the tiny red needle suddenly trembled violently. Then, the needle directly pierced through the bottom of the pagoda. Bang! The entire pagoda exploded apart and transformed into fragments that filled the sky. At the same time, a ray of red light pierced through the center of the Pagoda King's forehead. Hiss! A strand of blood flew out from the center of the Pagoda King's forehead. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. He'd been killed in an instant. All the experts of the deity race were flabbergasted. They hadn't expected that the Pagoda King would be killed in an instant. Ma Yingxin's face was covered in astonishment as well. The Pagoda King's strength was even above his own, but he'd actually been killed in an instant? Who exactly is that woman? Amu glanced at the needle that floated in front of Xiao Dao, and then she said, "That needle isn't bad." Yi Xian said, "It's called the Needle of Destiny. It's very formidable." Amu nodded, and then she glanced at Xiao Dao. "She's very formidable." Yi Xian nodded. "Very formidable." Actually, Xiao Dao's strength had always been a mystery. Xiao Dao glanced at the illusory figure of the Pagoda King. I really don't like it when people interrupt me. The Pagoda King stared fixedly at Xiao Dao and was about to speak when the needle in front of Xiao Dao suddenly flew out. Hiss! The Pagoda King's head flew into the air. On the other hand, Xiao Dao gestured with his right hand, and the Pagoda King's black Xiao Ta was put away. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Now he finally understood why Xiao Dao had so many treasures. All of them were obtained by killing others. Meanwhile, Xiao Dao turned to look at Yi Xian. Is she still here? Yi Xian was stunned, but he quickly understood who Xiao Dao was talking about. That white little fellow. Yi Xian nodded. She hasn't left yet. Xiao Dao fell silent for a moment, and he hesitated to speak. Meanwhile, the white little fellow appeared in front of Yi Xian again. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw the white little fellow. What does she want to do? The white little fellow pulled out a candied haw and passed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he took the candied haw and placed it in his mouth. When she saw Yi Xian swallow it, the white little fellow grinned, patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly with her little claw, and then waved her claw swiftly. Yi Xian blinked. He didn't understand what the white little fellow was trying to say at all. Moreover, the Shaolinger was breaking through again. On the other hand, Xiao Dao took a deep, meaningful glance at Yi Xian from afar. She understood what the white little fellow was trying to say. Meanwhile, the white little fellow suddenly turned around and gazed at the needle of destiny in front of Xiao Dao. She blinked, and then she waved her little claw, causing the needle of destiny to appear in her claw. Xiao Dao didn't stop her. The white little fellow sized up the needle, shook her head, and then passed the needle to Yi Xian. Yi Xian blinked. Is she giving it to me? The white little fellow placed the needle in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian glanced at Xiao Dao, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, It belongs to me. The white little fellow gazed at Xiao Dao, blinked, and then withdrew a candied haw. She flew over to Xiao Dao, passed the candied haw to Xiao Dao, and then pointed at the needle in Yi Xian's hand. At this moment, Yi Xian understood. She's going to trade. She's using candied haw to exchange for the needle of destiny. Yi Xian's mind went blank. Xiao Dao gazed at the white little fellow without saying a word. At this moment, the white little fellow suddenly plucked the 2 candied haws from the top of the candied haw, and then she passed the candied haw that only had 1 candied haw left to Xiao Dao. Obviously, she felt that the needle of destiny was only worth 1 candied haw and not a skewer. Xiao Dao gazed at the white little fellow without saying a word. The white little fellow blinked, and then she waved the candied haw in her claw. Does she not want it? Xiao Dao gazed at the white little fellow and said, You win. As soon as she finished speaking, she put the candied haw away. The white little fellow grinned. Meanwhile, she suddenly turned around as if she'd noticed something. Her eyes lit up, and then she flew towards the distance. Yi Xian's expression changed when he saw this. He calmly put the needle of destiny away, and then he hurriedly chased after her with a moo. Xiao Dao vanished on the spot as well. On the other hand, Divine General Xueqi's expression changed drastically because the white little fellow had gone to the deity imperial palace. That was the core area of the deity race. What's she going to do? Xueqi didn't dare think too much about it, and he hurriedly chased after her. Before long, Yi Xian saw an extremely grand ancient city floating in midair. The entire city was constructed from an unknown metal, and it was extremely dazzling and resplendent. In the sky above the city, there was a huge jade-like light array. The jade-like light array enveloped the entire deity imperial palace, and on top of the jade-like light array, there was a pitch-black throne. A Mu who stood beside Yi Xian pointed at the throne and said, That's the legendary Divine King's throne. It's the most precious treasure of the first generation of deity race, and it's even more precious than the divine tree of origin. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, What's its use? A Mu blinked, and then she said, I don't know the specifics. In any case, it's very precious. It can be said that the Divine King's throne is the true symbol of the deity race. Right at this moment, she suddenly raised her head to look at the Divine King's throne, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. Yi Xian looked up and saw a white little fellow sitting on the Divine King's throne. Has she taken a fancy to the Divine King's throne? When Divine General Xueqi saw the white little fellow sitting on the Divine King's throne, his face instantly turned ghastly pale. That's the Divine King's throne. the supreme symbol of the deity race. Meanwhile, Xiao Dao gazed at the white little fellow from afar, and no one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, the white little fellow suddenly waved her little claw at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he looked at Amu. Is she calling me? Amu nodded. Yes, she's calling you. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he pulled Amu and flew to the Divine King's throne. The white little fellow patted the Divine King's throne, indicating for Yi Xian to sit down. Yi Xian blinked. Can I sit? The white little fellow nodded. Yi Xian was about to sit down, but Amu suddenly stopped him and shook his head. You can't sit with your strength. Yi Xian looked at the white little fellow, and she blinked, and then pointed at the Divine King's throne. Yi Xian smiled. All right. I believe you. With that, he directly sat on the Divine King's throne. At this moment, the Divine King's throne shook violently, and a powerful force directly enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, but at this moment, the white little fellow suddenly patted the Divine King's throne. Boom! The Divine King's throne immediately fell silent. Amu! Yi Xian blinked, and then he looked at the white little fellow. It's quite comfortable. The white little fellow grinned, and then she waved her little claw. The Divine King's throne was directly stored into the prison pagoda within Yi Xian's body. Following that, she turned to look in a certain direction, and her eyes lit up again. Seeing this scene, Xiao Dao shook his head. Something big is going to happen. Yi Xian. Chapter 1077. Seeing the little white fellow's expression, Yi Xian knew that she must have found another treasure. The little white fellow transformed into a beam of white light and disappeared into the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly followed her with Amu. It had to be said that Yi Xian and Amu were very excited at this moment. There was also a sense of thrill amidst the excitement. On the spot, Divine General Xueqi stared blankly at the Divine King's throne that had disappeared. Gone. The Divine Tree of Origin was gone. Now the Divine King's throne was gone too. Both of the deity race's treasures were gone. What should he do? Xueqi suddenly turned to look at Xiao Dao in the distance. He just stared at Xiao Dao and didn't dare to say anything harsh. Xiao Dao didn't pay any attention to him and vanished on the spot. After Xiao Dao disappeared, Xueqi's expression instantly turned ferocious as he turned to leave. In the distance, Yi Xian and Amu followed the little white fellow as she flew. On the way, Yi Xian looked into the distance. Where is she going? Amu glanced into the distance and said, That's the direction of Hades. Hades? Yi Xian was stunned and said, Are there any treasures in Hades? Amu nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was about to ask something when the little white fellow in the distance suddenly sped up. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression changed and he hurriedly sped up as well. Before long, Yi Xian and Amu were brought to an ancient city by the little white fellow. This ancient city was completely different from the deity race's Divine King's palace. The entire ancient city was incomparably gloomy and filled with bone-piercing cold winds. Yi Xian glanced around and frowned. This place gave him an extremely uncomfortable feeling. At this moment, the little white fellow pushed open the ancient city's gates and floated in. Yi Xian hurriedly followed along with Amu. After entering the city, the sinister aura became even stronger. Right at this moment, the little white fellow suddenly stopped. Before her was a long bridge. Below the bridge was a pool of black water, and in the middle of the bridge stood an old lady. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Amu's expression was incomparably solemn. That's Polo, the guide of Hades. He's very strong. Very strong. Yi Xian nodded and was secretly on guard. At this moment, the little white guy floated to Polo. Polo looked at the little guy, then took out a bowl filled with clear water. She handed the bowl to the little white guy. Amu hurriedly said, Don't drink it. That's the water of the river of forgetfulness. The little white fellow blinked. She sniffed lightly, shook her head, and was about to go over. At this time, Polo suddenly stood in front of her. The little white guy blinked and then raised his little paw, meaning, Do you want to fight? Polo looked at the little white guy and didn't say anything. The little white guy suddenly turned around and returned to Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was stunned, but soon, she flew out again. This time, there was a black box in her paw. A box. Yi Xian. The little white guy was about to open the box. At this time, Xiao Dao suddenly appeared next to the little white guy. She looked at him and said, "You go over." The little white guy blinked, then put away the box and flew over. Polo narrowed his eyes and was about to attack when a mysterious power suddenly enveloped him. Polo's pupils shrank. She looked at Xiao Dao in front of her. Xiao Dao stared at Polo. "If you don't want to die, then stay here. Otherwise, not even Ebzang can save you." Ebzang, the #1 super expert of Hades. Polo looked at Xiao Dao and said in a hoarse voice, "Who are you?" Xiao Dao didn't say anything. She directly followed the little white guy. Yi Xian and Amu also hurriedly followed. At this time Polo suddenly said, "High Priest." Amu stopped, looked at Polo beside him, blinked and said, "Polo, how are you?" Polo looked at the High Priest. "Who is she?" Amu smiled. "She's called Xiao Dao from Tendo's pawn shop." Hearing this, Polo's pupils shrank. Tendo's pawn shop. Polo looked at Amu. "What are you doing?" Amu blinked. "I don't know what we're doing either, hee." With that, she grabbed Yi Xian's hand and ran. On the bridge, Polo stood all alone. Soon, the little white guy brought Yi Xian and Amu to a large hall. Yi Xian looked up and saw 3 large black words above the hall. Hall of Life and Death. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Amu softly said, "It's where the Lord of Hades lives. He can control the life and death of all living beings in the world." Of course, that's a bit of an exaggeration. After reaching the Kama realm, he no longer has any control. Yi Xian nodded. At this time, the little white guy suddenly flew in. Yi Xian hurriedly brought Amu with him. Xiao Dao looked around, a trace of worry in her eyes. She didn't think too much about it and hurriedly followed. After the little white guy entered the Hall of Life and Death, she looked around. Finally, her gaze fell on a mirror at the top of the hall. The mirror was the same size as an ordinary mirror. The only difference was that there was a closed eye at the center of the mirror. The little white guy's eyes lit up when she saw the mirror. She flew directly to the mirror and was about to touch it with her little claw. At this moment, the eye suddenly opened. The little white guy was shocked and hurriedly retracted her claw. But it didn't take long for her to realize that she shouldn't be afraid. That eye was looking at the little white fellow, and the little white fellow was looking at her as well. Right at this moment, some scenes suddenly appeared in the mirror. The first to appear was a man in green robes. However, as soon as this man appeared, the scene stopped abruptly. The little white guy blinked and waved her little claw lightly. The eye just stared at the little white guy, and a powerful force suddenly swept out. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene, and he was about to attack. However, right at this moment, the little white fellow suddenly opened its mouth and inhaled, and then the powerful force vanished without a trace. At the same time, the mirror became slightly illusory. At this moment, the eye was filled with terror. The little white guy grabbed the mirror and tossed it at Yi Xian. The mirror was tossed into the world prison pagoda. Yi Xian was speechless. Amu suddenly said, "This is the mirror of misfortune. It can observe a person's past and present lives. It can even be used to spy on the world. It's very extraordinary." The mirror of misfortune. Yi Xian nodded. Past and present lives? I'll have to take a good look at it later. He really wanted to know about his past and present lives. Meanwhile, the little white guy hadn't left yet. She sniffed lightly, and it didn't take long for her eyes to light up. She waved her little claw lightly. Immediately after that, the ground suddenly trembled under the gazes of Yi Xian, Amu, and Xiao Dao. The treasure is underground. Yi Xian and Amu exchanged a glance. Yi Xian asked, "Are there any other treasures?" Amu spoke in a low voice. "I don't know. Just watch." Boom. Right at this moment, the entire Hall of Life and Death shook violently. Immediately after, a ray of black light shot into the sky from underground. The little white guy flew out, and Yi Xian and the other two hurriedly followed. Outside the Hall of Life and Death, a thick ancient book floated in the air above the hall. Yi Xian looked at the ancient book and asked, "Amu, what's this?" Amu looked at the ancient book. Moments later, her pupils constricted. That's the treasure of the underworld, the Heavenly Book of Divination. The Heavenly Book of Divination? Yi Xian was about to ask something when the little white guy had already flown to the Heavenly Book of Divination. At this moment, the heavenly book of divination suddenly opened, and a powerful aura enveloped her. The little white guy waved her claw, and a strand of purple chi enveloped the heavenly book of divination. The latter shuddered, and then it suddenly closed. At this moment, the little white guy suddenly waved her claw swiftly, as if she was saying something. The heavenly book of divination also trembled slowly, as if it was responding. This went on for about 15 minutes, and the heavenly book of divination suddenly floated in front of the little white guy. The little white guy grinned, waved her claw, and a strand of purple chi enveloped the heavenly book of divination. The heavenly book of divination trembled happily. After a while, the heavenly book of divination suddenly turned into a ray of white light and entered the prison pagoda in Yi Xian's abdomen. It went in again. Yi Xian felt like he was in a dream. In such a short period of time, he had obtained a few super divine items. Moreover, the heaven-battling beast seemed to be about to reach adulthood. Yi Xian looked at the little white guy, and the little white guy turned its head to the right. Seeing this, a moo said excitedly, "That's where the ancient Xing clan is." The little white guy was about to fly away when Xiao Dao suddenly blocked her way. The little white guy blinked and looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao sighed softly. "Something big is going to happen." The little white guy waved her little claws. Xiao Dao sighed again and turned to look at Yi Xian below. "Are you really not going to stop her?" Yi Xian hesitated and then asked, "Why?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "If she continues to search like this, she will find all the treasures in the era of gods and demons. Do you know how many forces you will offend? You will offend the deity race, the underworld, and the ancient Xing clan. Have you thought about the consequences?" Yi Xian asked, "Miss Xiao Dao, if I don't take these treasures, will they not kill me?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian and said nothing. Yi Xian laughed. "I am on the side of the Wu clan." It was simple and clear. Xiao Dao turned to look at Amu and said softly, "You are very powerful." Yi Xian had made his stand clear in one sentence. Amu was silent. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "You will get into big trouble." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, I didn't take those treasures." At the side, the little white fellow nodded hurriedly. She pointed at herself with her little claw as if she was saying that she was the one who took it. Xiao Dao looked at the little white guy, and the latter waved her little claws quickly. Yi Xian had no idea what she was talking about. At this moment, Xiao Dao suddenly sighed. "You have to understand that you are alone now. He and the horned girl are not here, right?" The little white guy blinked and pointed at Yi Xian. Xiao Dao said calmly, "He is the weakest among us." Yi Xian was speechless. The little white guy thought for a moment and waved her little claws quickly. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. "What did she say?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "She said that if anyone bullies her, she will call for help." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1078. Call for help. Yi Xian had a strange expression on his face. Call for who? It must be the green-robed man and the horned little girl. At this moment, the little Taoist suddenly said, "Go!" Yi Xian and the little white fellow looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao looked back at the little fellow. "Go! I'll take care of it for you." She knew that this was an opportunity for her, Xiao Dao. If she did not form this good karma, she would not have such a chance again. Although this good karma would also lead to many bad karma, it was worth it. It was very, very worth it. The little white fellow grinned when she heard Xiao Dao's words. Then she turned and ran away. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao remained expressionless. "You guys go first." Yi Xian wanted to say something, but Amu quickly pulled him back. "Let's go." With that, she pulled Yi Xian away and soon disappeared into the distance. After Yi Xian and Amu left, Xiao Dao turned to look at a man who looked like a monk. The man was dressed in a monk's robe and held a string of prayer beads in his left hand. Abzang. This man was the underworld's strongest expert. Abzang looked at Xiao Dao and said softly, "Miss Xiao Dao, how have you been?" Xiao Dao smiled. "Abzang, you've improved a lot." Abzang shook his head. "I've never been able to reach that level." Xiao Dao said softly, "Not many people have been able to reach that level since ancient times." Abzang looked at Xiao Dao. "Is there anyone in this world who has reached that level?" Xiao Dao nodded. "Yes, and there are quite a few." Abzang frowned. Quite a few. Little Taoist nodded slightly. I already know of 5. Abzang fell silent. Xiao Dao looked at Abzang. Don't you want to know who it is? Abzang shook his head. What's the point of knowing or not? Xiao Dao looked at Abzang. You're wrong. It's very meaningful to you and the underworld. Abzang raised his head to look at Xiao Dao. Please enlighten me, Miss Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao turned around and gazed into the distance. Do you know who that little fellow who took the treasure of the underworld is? The legendary spirit ancestor. Abzang said softly. Xiao Dao nodded. Yes. This is the last spirit ancestor of the 5th dimension. Abu looked into the distance, thinking about something. Xiao Dao said with smile. Don't even think about hitting on her, you will die without a burial. The 5 people that Miss Xiao Dao mentioned are related to her? Abzang asked softly. Xiao Dao nodded. Yes. And the young man beside her. Those 5 people are also related to him. That young man is not simple. Unfortunately, the Wu clan beat him to it. Abzang said. Xiao Dao looked at Abzang. They took away the most precious treasure of the underworld. What do you plan to do? Miss Xiao Dao, do you want the underworld to give up on recovering it? Abzang asked softly. Xiao Dao smiled and did not say anything. Abzang suddenly said, Miss Xiao Dao, their actions are like bullying. The reason I didn't make a move was because of Mississippi, the little Taoist smiled and said. My needle of destiny was also exchanged for a tongue hulu by her. Abzang looked at Xiao Dao and did not say anything. Xiao Dao smiled. Abzang, you are a wise person. Sometimes losing something is not a bad thing. Good or bad, it is often decided by a single thought. Abzang suddenly asked, Miss, can you ask him to return the 2 treasures to the underworld? Xiao Dao asked, if he returns them, can the underworld not interfere with his affairs? Abzang was silent for a moment. Miss, can you ask him to leave the Wu clan? Xiao Dao shook her head and smiled. Do you see that? Even if he doesn't take the treasures, the underworld will still target him because of his identity, right? Abzang was silent. Xiao Dao smiled. That's all I have to say. I don't want to say anything else. Today, give me Xiao Dao some face and do not take action. Then she turned and left. Abzang suddenly asked, what if we take action? Xiao Dao stopped and turned to look at Abzang. I will make the heavenly clan disappear from this world. If you don't believe me, you can try. Then she turned and left. The heavenly clan. Abzang was silent. Xiao Dao was talking about the heavenly clan and not the underworld. He naturally understood what it meant. Xiao Dao. Just how strong was this woman who used to be so mysterious? No one knew. Abzang was silent. At this time, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Abzang. This man was the deity race's modern deity god, Haotian. Abzang looked at Haotian. The latter smiled. What an arrogant Miss Xiao Dao. Abzang said softly. Do you think she doesn't have the strength? Haotian smiled. She is definitely not weak. However, she might have underestimated us. Abzang said. We have to give her face. Haotian nodded. If this woman completely turns to the Wu clan, it will be very disadvantageous for us. Then, he looked into the distance and smiled. They are about to reach the Guxing clan. I would like to see if the people from the Guxing clan will show her some respect. At the end of the horizon, Xiao Dao suddenly stopped. She turned her head and looked at them. A disdainful smile appeared on her face. Underestimate you? You are just a group of 5th dimension ants. Why should I overestimate you? After saying that, she disappeared. Soon, the white little fellow arrived at the Guxing clan with a Mu and Yi Xian. The Guxing clan's habitat was not comparable to the deity king palace and the underworld. They lived in a primitive forest. The white little fellow seemed to have discovered something. She was excited and ran quickly. Soon, she arrived in front of a cave. Just as she was about to enter the cave, a powerful force suddenly attacked her from the side. At this time, Xiao Dao appeared next to the white little fellow. She waved her right hand and the powerful force disappeared without a trace. Little Taoist turned his head and saw a man walking towards him. The man was completely naked, and he held a giant axe in his hand. He looked at little Taoist, and without saying a word, he leaped up and swung the axe at little Taoist. Xiao Dao waved her sleeve. Boom! The giant axe in the man's hand exploded. He was pushed back dozens of feet and slammed heavily into the mountain wall. At this moment, a heavy expression appeared in the man's eyes. However, just as he was about to rush toward Xiao Dao, a voice suddenly drifted over from the side. Stop! Upon hearing this voice, the man respectfully took a step back. Xiao Dao glanced to the left. Over there, a man could be seen walking over. This man was clad in beast skin. His long hair draped over his shoulders and he exuded a tyrannical aura. This man was none other than the current leader of the Guxing clan, Gu Zhantian. Gu Zhantian walked toward Xiao Dao. Miss Xiao Dao, I trust you have been well since we last met. Xiao Dao ignored Gu Zhantian. She stared at the white little fellow in front of her. The little fellow blinked and pointed at Xiao Dao before pointing at Gu Zhantian. Xiao Dao laughed. If you really want it, go in and take it. With me here, no one will be able to harm you. Little White shook her head. She turned and flew to the front of Yi Xian. After that, she pointed at Yi Xian as she waved her claws lightly. Yi Xian stared at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao spoke in a heavy voice. She said she wants to leave. As for those treasures, she has already strengthened them. You can use them first, but you are not allowed to harm them. If they want to leave, you are not allowed to obstruct them. If they are unwilling to leave, she will come and find you in the future. After that, she will strengthen them again, helping them to improve themselves. Yi Xian was stunned. After that he nodded. Okay. At this moment, the treasures in his body suddenly flew out. They trembled lightly, as though they were trying to express something. Little White grinned. With a wave of its claws, countless strands of violet qi enveloped those treasures. As for itself, it directly turned illusory. Little White pointed at Yi Xian as it waved its claws. Yi Xian gazed at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao fell silent for a short moment before he said, She asked them to follow you. That way, she'll be able to find them in the future. If they are unwilling to follow you, then they can leave. However, they can't harm you. Otherwise, they'll be beaten to death. Yi Xian hurriedly gazed at the little fellow and asked, Beaten to death by who? Little White blinked, grinned, and then waved its claws swiftly. Yi Xian gazed at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao didn't speak this time. Right at this moment, an enormous axe suddenly flew out from within the cave. It was mostly pitch black while its blade was bright red. The handle seemed as if it was made from lava, and it was completely crimson red. Moreover, it emanated a powerful and ruthless aura. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he saw this enormous axe. The might of this axe is absolutely superior to the Execution Heaven Sword. What axe was this? Yi Xian turned his head and glanced at Amu. Amu spoke in a light voice. The battle god axe was once a treasure belonging to the first clan leader of the Guxing clan. It's also the most precious treasure of the Guxing clan. However, it said that Guxing was heavily injured when he fought against that supreme expert. Battle God Axe. Yi Xian's gaze landed on the Battle God Axe. That axe was trembling lightly, as though it was trying to express something. Little White blinked its eyes before turning to Gu Zhantian, who was not far away. Gu Zhantian's expression turned extremely grim. He didn't expect that the Battle God Axe would fly out by itself. Gu Zhantian spoke in a heavy voice. Divine Axe, you cannot leave with outsiders. At this moment, the Battle God Axe abruptly chopped down ruthlessly towards Gu Zhantian. Upon seeing this scene, the spectators were all stunned. What was going on? Gu Zhantian was also stunned. Did this Battle God Axe go crazy? It actually dared to act against him? Not daring to think too much, Gu Zhantian brandished the axe and slashed out. Boom! The Battle God Axe was forced to a halt. And at this moment, a roar of rage rang out from within the Battle God Axe. As the sound of this roar rang out, Gu Zhantian instantly retreated tens of meters. When he stopped, a look of terror could be seen on his face. The Battle God Axe didn't attack again. Instead, it floated towards the illusory Little White. The little guy blinked and then pointed at Yi Xian in the distance with its little paw. The Battle God Axe nodded. Seeing the Battle God Axe nodding, Little White waved its claws as a violet qi enveloped the Battle God Axe. At this moment, Little White completely vanished. At the instant it vanished, a black box appeared before Yi Xian. Upon seeing the black box, Xiao Dao's eyelids twitched. P.S. Good luck Wuhan. Good luck China. Chapter 1079. Little Rascal left. Staring at the box in front of him, Yi Xian suddenly felt a sense of disappointment. With regards to Little Rascal, he had a very favorable impression of him. At this moment, Gu Zhantian suddenly walked towards Yi Xian. Leave the divine battle axe behind. Yi Xian stared at Gu Zhantian. Did you see that? It was the one who chose to follow us. Gu Zhantian stared at Yi Xian. I don't wish to waste words with you. Leave the divine axe behind or this place shall be the place where all of you will die. At this moment, Xiao Dao, who was not far away, suddenly laughed. Is the Gu Xing clan very powerful? Gu Zhantian stared at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao abruptly vanished from his original location. From afar, Gu Zhantian's eyes narrowed. He brandished his axe with both hands and ferociously slashed out. Boom! As the axe descended, Gu Zhantian directly retreated 100 meters. And the moment he stopped, a flying dagger suddenly flew towards him. Gu Zhantian's expression changed as he slashed out with his axe. Boom! The instant the axe came into contact with the flying dagger, it instantly shattered. The flying dagger continued forward, slashing towards Gu Zhantian. And at this moment, Gu Zhantian stomped his right foot and retreated several hundred meters. After stopping, Gu Zhantian stared fixedly at Xiao Dao. At this moment, other than heaviness, there was also trepidation in his eyes. Before Xiao Dao, that flying dagger quietly floated in the air. This flying dagger looked extremely ordinary, yet it contained a shocking amount of divine energy within it. Xiao Dao glanced at Gu Zhantian. If you dare to attack again, I will kill you. Don't display the arrogance of your Gu Xing clan before me. Even your ancestor isn't qualified to do so. Do you understand? After speaking, she turned to Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. He hurriedly pulled a mu and followed behind Xiao Dao. He could sense that right now in this dimension, there were many experts spying on him. If he didn't follow Xiao Dao, he most probably wouldn't be able to leave this dimension. Little Daoist put away the flying knife and walked into the distance. Yi Xian and a mu quickly followed. As for Gu Zhantian, he didn't act again. Although people from the Gu Xing clan were arrogant, they weren't fools. The strength of this woman before him was clearly above him. If he acted, he would die for sure. Just like that, he could only watch as Xiao Dao and the other two left. In the distance, Yi Xian tugged at Xiao Dao's sleeve. Xiao Dao, why don't we speed up? Xiao Dao looked around and said, I'm going to walk slowly. I'm going to show them that we're going to walk out of here openly. If they're not satisfied, then come at me. Her voice was so loud that the entire nothingness dimension could hear her clearly. Yi Xian glanced at Xiao Dao. This woman wants to kill. He could sense that Xiao Dao was extremely angry at this moment. It was best not to antagonize her at this moment, or the consequences would be dire. On the way, Yi Xian felt some trepidation. If the heavenly race surrounded them, it would be extremely dangerous for them. However, no one came out to obstruct them. At this moment, Xiao Dao and Amu suddenly stopped. The two of them turned their heads and looked to the right. There was a grave there. Yi Xian also stared at it. At this moment, Xiao Dao shook her head. You're a step too slow. After speaking, she walked away. Yi Xian glanced at Amu. What does she mean? Amu blinked. I don't know either. Yi Xian stared at Amu. You definitely know. Amu giggled. There's an old friend sleeping here. She's a little slow to wake up, that's all. After speaking, she pulled Yi Xian and walked forward. Yi Xian asked, Amu, why did you wake up earlier than her? Amu blinked. Tendo rewards hard work. Yi Xian was speechless. Soon, the three of them arrived at the exit of the void dimension. There, the three of them saw Old Tomb Keeper. Old Tomb Keeper looked at the three of them. Finally, his gaze landed on Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Yi Xian blinked. What are you trying to say, senior? Old Tomb Keeper shook his head. I don't want to say anything. Yi Xian was speechless. Old Tomb Keeper looked at Xiao Dao. Miss Xiao Dao, they won't let this go. Xiao Dao smiled. Will they go to the pawn shop to take revenge on me? Old Tomb Keeper shook his head. Of course they wouldn't dare to take revenge on you, but... As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian. Seeing this, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. What was the meaning of this? Xiao Dao calmly said, "Let's go." After speaking, she left the void dimension. Yi Xian hurriedly left with a moo. After the three of them left, three people suddenly appeared. These three people were Hao Tian, Abzang, and Gu Zhantian. Hao Tian looked at Old Tomb Keeper. Do you know the true identity of Xiao Dao? Old Tomb Keeper shook his head. I don't. After speaking, he turned and left. Hao Tian suddenly said, Sir, your mission has been completed. Old Tomb Keeper halted. He shook his head. I'm not guarding you guys. With that, he picked up the broom at the side and walked away. Hearing Old Tomb Keeper's words, Hao Tian frowned. At this moment, Gu Zhantian suddenly asked, Are we letting them leave just like that? Abzang shook his head. That Xiao Dao is too mysterious. We have just awakened and our strength has yet to fully recover. It's not suitable for us to act. Gu Zhantian solemnly asked, What is this woman's background exactly? Hao Tian shook his head. I only know that the previous emperor was extremely respectful towards her. Abzang suddenly asked, Has the divine teacher awakened? Hao Tian shook his head. Not yet, but he should wake up soon. Abzang fell silent. Divine teacher. Just like the high priest of the Wu clan, the status of the divine teacher in the heavenly clan was even higher than the three of them. Back then, the reason why the heavenly clan and the Wu clan went into hibernation was because the divine teacher and high priest of the heavenly clan had decided to do so. No one dared to refute the decision made by the two of them. The high priest of the Wu clan had already awakened, but the divine teacher of the heavenly clan had yet to wake up. At this moment, Hao Tian suddenly spoke, Maybe now is the best time to kill the high priest. Hearing this, Abzang and Gu Zhantian's countenances wavered. If the high priest of the Wu clan fell, it would definitely be a calamity to the Wu clan. Without the high priest, how could the Wu clan resist the heavenly clan? Xiao Dao brought Yi Xian and a moo back to the pawnshop. Within the pawnshop, Xiao Dao sat on a chair as she stared at Yi Xian and a moo. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before asking, Xiao Dao, what's the matter? Xiao Dao glanced at a moo. The high priest. A moo blinked. Hello, Miss Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao laughed. I have to say, you're very impressive. The smile on a moo's face gradually vanished. I have no ill intentions. Xiao Dao laughed lightly. I know you have no ill intentions. As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian. My harvest is not small. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he took out the needle of fate and passed it to Xiao Dao. Miss Xiao Dao, I'm returning this to you. Xiao Dao glanced at the needle of fate. Why are you returning it to me? This is something she exchanged for using candied fruits. It's yours now. There's no need to return it to me. Yi Xian glanced at Xiao Dao. You won't take revenge on me, right? Xiao Dao stared at Yi Xian. Are you afraid of me taking revenge? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded his head. If this woman wanted to take revenge on him, his future days wouldn't be easy. Xiao Dao stared at Yi Xian. This needle is yours now. As she spoke, she opened her palm and a mirror appeared in it. It was the mirror of misfortune that she had obtained from the underworld. Looking at the mirror of misfortune in her hand, Xiao Dao's expression was somewhat complicated. I never expected this mirror to fall into your hands. Yi Xian asked, Miss Xiao Dao, is there something special about this mirror? Xiao Dao nodded. This mirror is called the Mirror of Misfortune, also known as the Mirror of Three Lives. It can see past lives, present lives, and future lives. Of course, it can't do that now. However, at its peak it can do that. If it falls into the hands of a powerful spell god, it can also see its next life. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Spell god. Xiao Dao said indifferently. It's a mysterious profession from a long time ago. It's quite powerful, but it's almost extinct now. Yi Xian asked again, how long ago? Xiao Dao said angrily, why do you have so many questions? Are you looking for a beating? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Daoist glared at Yi Xian and then said, this mirror of misfortune has an especially great function now, and that is, it can observe the world. You can use it to observe any place in the five-dimensional universe. Of course, some people in some places still can't, because they are powerful enough to see through the mysteries of heaven. Unless you're strong enough, then you'll be able to see them. Yi Xian blinked and then he said, "Can I use it to find the woman in a plain dress?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "If she doesn't stop you, then you should be able to see her." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "I'll give it a try." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at the mirror of misfortune. "Find the woman in a plain dress." Mirror of misfortune was speechless. Xiao Dao shook her head. "You really are an idiot." As she spoke, she picked up the mirror of misfortune and pointed it at Yi Xian. "Pour your fresh blood and profound energy into it, and then imagine the appearance of the woman in a plain dress in your mind." Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly, and then he nodded. He flicked his finger, and a drop of blood essence entered the mirror of misfortune. At the same time, a strand of pure profound energy surged into the mirror of misfortune, and the appearance of the woman in a plain dress appeared in his mind. The mirror of misfortune suddenly started trembling, and the space in the surroundings gradually started to surge like waves. A short moment later, the eye suddenly opened. Bang! A powerful force swept out from the pawn shop, and then it shot into the depths of the starry sky. An enormous illusory eye suddenly appeared there. The eye looked down at the starry sky, and a mysterious force suddenly pierced through the starry sky and arrived at the fourth dimension. In the fourth dimension, in an unknown expanse of the starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped moving, and then she raised her head to look. Bang! In the fifth dimension, the enormous illusory eye suddenly exploded. Within the pawn shop, the mirror of misfortune in front of Yi Xian suddenly closed, and a strand of fresh blood flowed out from it. At the same time, the entire mirror of misfortune had cracked apart. Yi Xian was stunned on the spot. Xiao Dao looked at the cracked mirror of misfortune with a complicated expression. Release one. In the distant fourth dimension, in the starry sky, a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of the woman's mouth. That was many years ago. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and continued forward. Chapter 1080. The pawn shop suddenly fell silent. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao and waited for Xiao Dao's answer. Xiao Dao shook her head and said softly, "She's too strong. Heaven's secrets are unfathomable." Yi Xian fell silent. Xiao Dao glanced at the mirror of misfortune in her hand and said, "Keep this mirror well. It'll be very useful to you." Yi Xian nodded and put the mirror of misfortune away. As if thinking of something, he took out the book of divination. "Xiao Dao, what's this book of divination?" Xiao Dao glanced at the book of divination and said, "This is a divine item of the Phantom Valley path. It's not suitable for you." As she spoke, she looked at Amu. "You can give it to her." Amu blinked and stretched out her hand. Yi Xian didn't think much of it. He passed the book of divination to Amu and said, "What's the Phantom Valley path?" Amu smiled and put the book of divination away. The Phantom Valley path is a person. A legendary person. It's said to be from the era of Tendo. In any case, this person is very powerful. He even schemed against Tendo. Yi Xian asked hurriedly, "And the result?" Amu smiled. After Tendo was schemed against, he beat him to death. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, little Taoist suddenly said, "The heavenly Tao's sinister tricks were learned from this book of divination." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and looked at Amu. "I want to learn it too." Xiao Dao said indifferently, "You don't have to learn it. You're self-taught." Yi Xian was speechless. Amu suddenly said, "We'll learn it together." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." Amu is still more considerate. At this moment Xiao Dao suddenly said, "Show me the God King's throne." Yi Xian nodded before taking out the God King's throne. It had to be said that he was extremely curious about the God King's throne because he still did not know its use. Xiao Dao sized up the Divine King's throne and said, "This is the throne of the deity race's first Divine King. It's a symbol of status for the deity race." Yi Xian quickly asked, "What's the use?" Xiao Dao sat on the God King's throne. In the next moment, a white halo suddenly enveloped the entire pawn shop. Under the cover of this white halo, Yi Xian instantly felt a formless pressure. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "Try drawing your sword." Yi Xian nodded and unsheathed his sword. As the sword slashed down, he was stunned. Because his sword intent and sword chi were completely gone. All that was left was a simple strike. Moreover, the might of this strike that was executed with physical strength was at least a few times weaker. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao said indifferently, "This is the God domain. It can suppress the opponent's cultivation and strength. If the two races were to fight, you would realize that within the range of this deity territory, the battle strength of the opponent would be weakened by at least half. If a super expert were to use this deity prison, the opponent would be weakened to the point that they would be no different from an ordinary person." Yi Xian was visibly moved when he heard this. He hadn't expected the God King's throne to be so powerful. It was simply a divine weapon for group battles. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, "The God King's throne has always been an existence that my Wu clan is rather wary of. Fortunately, Hao Tian doesn't have the same strength as Miss Xiao Dao. Otherwise, my Wu clan would probably be beaten to the point of not being able to fight back." Xiao Dao stood up and continued, "The God King's thrones might will become even stronger in the future because that little fellow has strengthened it. It's breaking through now. If it succeeds, its might will increase by another qualitative leap." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "This is a good thing. Keep it well." Yi Xian nodded and put the God King's throne away. After that, he took out the Aries axe. "What about this?" Xiao Dao glanced at the Aries axe and said, "This axe isn't bad either. Among all the axes, it's only inferior to the legendary Sky Splitter." As she spoke, she suddenly looked at Yi Xian, who was about to speak. "Don't ask me what Sky Splitter is. Wait for me to finish first before you ask questions. Understand?" Yi Xian was speechless. At the side, Amu glanced at Yi Xian and covered her mouth as she laughed. Xiao Dao continued, "The first owner of this axe was called Gu Xing. He was an extremely impressive fellow with great combat strength. Actually, he was from the deity clan back then. Later on, in order to fight for the position of Divine King, he fought with that person for nearly a month until he died. It was also because of that battle that this god's axe was heavily injured." Yi Xian glanced at Xiao Dao. "Died in battle?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "He died in battle, but that doesn't mean he was weak. He was stubborn and didn't know how to be flexible. If he had changed a little back then, he wouldn't have died. Furthermore, his strength was truly formidable. If he fought Arrow one-on-one, they should be evenly matched." Evenly matched. Upon hearing this, Yi Xian's expression changed. He didn't know Gu Xing's strength, but he knew Arrow's. Arrow's strength wasn't just for show. Amu suddenly said, "Yes, that Gu Xing was known as the god of war back then, a true god of war. Even when he faced the divine king of the deity clan, he didn't take a step back and fought until he breathed his last." Yi Xian was puzzled. "But I don't think the relationship between the Gu Xing clan and the deity clan is that bad." Xiao Dao said calmly, "That's because of the Wu clan's existence." As she spoke, she glanced at Amu. "Because the Wu clan is strong enough, the deity clan and the Gu Xing clan have no choice but to join forces." Amu giggled. "We're not particularly strong. At least in front of Miss Xiao Dao, we're insignificant." Xiao Dao was expressionless. "Miss Amu is too humble. The strength of your Wu clan's first witch god is rarely seen since ancient times." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Can you beat Xiao Dao?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "Why don't you ask me if I can beat him or not?" Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Dao shot a glance at Yi Xian. "You're asking so many questions every day." As she spoke, she looked at Amu. If it weren't for the fifth dimension tribulation back then, the Wu clan and the deity clan would only have one clan left. Amu nodded. "Back then, our two clans were ready to fight it out. But we didn't expect the fifth dimension tribulation to come." Xiao Dao looked at Amu. "Now, the fifth dimension tribulation is coming again. What do you think?" Amu said with a smile, "Miss Xiao Dao, do you want our two clans to continue living in peace?" Xiao Dao softly said, "If you have this intention, then this matter is possible." Yi Xian didn't know the status of the high priest, but she did. The high priest of the Wu clan had a supreme position in the Wu clan. The Wu clan's patriarch was the leader of the Wu clan, but the high priest was the spiritual leader of the Wu clan. This was because the high priest could directly communicate with the witch god. As for the witch god, thinking of the witch god, Xiao Dao couldn't help but shake her head. Amu suddenly smiled. "Miss Xiao Dao, if I'm not wrong, the deity clan is definitely thinking about how to kill me first. What do you think? Xiao Dao was silent. Amu said, unless Miss Xiao Dao is willing to intervene and mediate the conflict between our two clans, I'm afraid this matter is impossible. Xiao Dao shook her head. I'm not interested. Yi Xian immediately said, Miss Xiao Dao, you can give it a try. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Are you willing to return all the divine objects to the deity clan and pay for the lives of the heavenly dragon race's dragons? Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. I'm not willing. Xiao Dao spread out his hands. Then that's it. You stewed the heavenly dragon race's sky dragon. They will definitely not let this matter rest. As for the grudge between the deity clan and the Wu clan, that is not something that I can mediate. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Amu nodded. The grudge between our two clans is very difficult to mediate. Furthermore, if my guess is not wrong, the deity clan is probably already plotting how to kill you and me. Yi Xian blinked then said, I'm not going out. Xiao Dao's face was expressionless. If you like to live here, then live here. Hearing that, Yi Xian was overjoyed, but at this time, Amu suddenly said, They will force you out. Use your friends and family outside. Yi Xian's face immediately darkened. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao smiled slightly. I don't help people fight. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Didn't you make a move earlier? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian and blinked. That little fellow, she's not a human. Yi Xian. Xiao Dao walked in front of Yi Xian and gently patted Yi Xian's shoulder. Then she said, Since you caused this trouble, you have to solve it yourself. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Xiao Dao, you're an accomplice. Xiao Dao blinked. If they come looking for me, then so be it. I'll just beat them to death. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. What's this called? This is called being willful with strength. At this moment, Amu, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly said, We can't leave the Endless City now. Because there will definitely be their experts outside the Endless City. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. It won't be long before they think of a way to force you out. Yi Xian said. Then what should we do? Amu said, The best way is to call for help. Yi Xian frowned slightly. A woman in a plain dress? Amu blinked. If you can call for help, then it would definitely be great. Yi Xian spread his hands. I can't. After a moment of silence, Amu said, We have to think of a way to return to the Wu clan. But the problem is, they definitely won't let us return to the Wu clan. Yi Xian said, You can ask the Wu clan's experts to come. Xiao Dao suddenly said, If she can come, why is she still saying all this to you? Yi Xian was a little puzzled and looked at Amu. Amu blinked, not saying anything. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Do you know why she woke up earlier than the celestial race's god adept? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Xiao Dao said lightly, Because she wants to take the initiative. And the price of this is that the Wu clan's experts will wake up later. Simply put, she will wake up first at the cost of the Wu clan's experts waking up later. Do you understand? Yi Xian was stunned, then said, The Wu clan's experts are still sleeping. Why didn't the celestial race get rid of them? Xiao Dao said lightly, Because the celestial race's god adept made a blood oath with her. As long as the person in the grave hasn't woken up, neither side can violate her. Yi Xian frowned. A blood oath. Xiao Dao was expressionless. Do you think it's the same as the oath you made? Your oath is like fart. But her oath is different. It's real. If the celestial race touches the Wu clan's experts now, the god adept will immediately die. Yi Xian blinked. That can't be. I always make vows. Xiao Dao glanced at Yi Xian. Is there any difference between swearing and fart? Is there? Yi Xian. P.S. I hope the epidemic will pass soon. You guys have to be careful and don't go out. Chapter 1081. An Oath. It has to be said that Yi Xian is indeed somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that in the god and demon era, the power of an oath would be so great. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian asked again, Miss Xiao Dao, are god teachers and high priests that important? Xiao Dao said lightly, You can ask your family's Amu. Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. Amu nodded. It's very important. In the past, I made a blood oath with the god race's god teacher. No matter who wakes up first, they are not allowed to harm the unconscious. No matter if it's her or me, we don't dare to violate this oath. And the people of our two clans don't dare to. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, but if they violate the oath now, they can sacrifice a god teacher and destroy the entire Wu clan. Amu smiled. They won't sacrifice their god teacher because the god teacher is very important. The god teacher is the spiritual leader of the Celestial clan. Their prestige in the Celestial clan is extremely high. They even have the power to remove the 100 clan leader from his position. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Why? Amu blinked. First, the future of the Celestial clan is planned by the god teacher. Second, the Celestial clan's god teacher is very good at fighting. Very good at fighting. Yi Xian looked at Amu and blinked. Then why don't you fight? Amu giggled. Fighting and whatnot. It's very boring. Yi Xian. At this moment, little Taoist suddenly said, although she can't fight, she can support. You're not particularly strong now. If you're a little stronger, you'll find that she's the best equipment in the world. There's no one else like her. Amu smiled and didn't say anything. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Amu's support ability was still very strong. The various upgrades were really a bit abnormal, and there were no side effects. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. You need to understand one thing. You have obtained the treasures of the various Tian clans. They will not let this matter rest, because every single treasure on your body can be said to be the symbol of their clan's divine object. They won't give it to you for free, especially when you're a wizard's attendant of the Wu clan, and the powerhouses of the Wu clan haven't fully woken up yet. The two of you are in great danger now. Do you understand? Yi Xian was silent. Amu was also silent. Both of them were in a terrible situation. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, we can transfer the aggro. Xiao Dao looked at Amu. Amu giggled and said, the two of us definitely can't deal with the entire Tian clan, so we have to find an opponent for them. Yi Xian blinked. Don't tell me you're looking for Xiao Dao. Amu rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. How can you trick your friends like this? Yi Xian was a bit puzzled. Then who should we look for? Let me say this first. I can't find the plain-dressed woman. Amu turned his head and looked outside, softly saying, only the powerhouses of the Tendo era can fight against the Tian clan of the God and Demon era. The Tendo era. Hearing this, Xiao Dao frowned. What do you want to do? Amu looked at Yi Xian and smiled. We're going to Buzhou Divine Mountain. Buzhou Divine Mountain? Yi Xian frowned. What is that place? Xiao Dao suddenly said, that is the only remnant of the Tendo era. Saying that, she stared at Amu. You have to think clearly, that place doesn't recognize your high priest status. Amu nodded. I know, but we have no other way, right? Xiao Dao was silent. Amu turned his head and looked at Yi Xian. If we go there, we can lead the Tian clan powerhouses away. That place can be said to be a forbidden area. Forbidden area? Yi Xian asked. There's still a forbidden area? Xiao Dao suddenly said, that place is different from other places. It is a sealed place, and it was personally sealed by the Tendo. If you go there, from a certain point of view, you are violating the Tendo's taboo. So, it's better to think clearly. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xiao Dao. He hesitated, wanting to say something, but stopped. Xiao Dao was expressionless. What do you want to say? Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. Miss Xiao Dao, are you really not a Tendo? Actually, he had always suspected that Xiao Dao was a Tendo, because this Xiao Dao is too powerful. In his opinion, only a Tendo would have such great ability. Xiao Dao was expressionless. What do you think? Yi Xian blinked. I think you are a Tendo because you are called Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Is calling Xiao Dao a Tendo? Yi Xian asked. Then if you are not a Tendo, why are you called Xiao Dao? And the pawn shop even uses the name of a Tendo. Xiao Dao glanced at Yi Xian. What does my name have to do with you? Are you pissed? Do you want to fight one-on-one? Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Amu suddenly laughed. Miss Xiao Dao is not a Tendo. Yi Xian looked at Amu, and Amu looked at Xiao Dao then said, I don't know Miss Xiao Dao's real identity, but I can be sure that she is not a Tendo. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao, and Xiao Dao suddenly glared at him. What are you looking at? Do you want to fight one-on-one? Yi Xian was speechless. This woman definitely wanted to beat him up. He had better keep his mouth shut, or he would definitely be beaten up. Although his physical body was already indestructible, he was confident that he could withstand Xiao Dao's fists. When it was time to be a coward, he still had to be a coward. Seeing that Yi Xian did not speak, Xiao Dao felt a little bored, and she waved her hand. If you want to go to Mount Buzhou, then hurry up. I won't be sending you off. At this moment, Amu gave Yi Xian a look. Yi Xian understood, and he walked in front of Xiao Dao, chuckling, Miss Xiao Dao, please send us off. Xiao Dao glanced at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian blinked, then chuckled, Miss Xiao Dao, if you don't send us off, we will be beaten to death. Xiao Dao expressionlessly said, I won't send you off. Yi Xian said, next time I see that little guy, I will help you get more purple gas. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said, I am serious. After a moment of silence, Xiao Dao said, Go find that one-legged woman. With that, a mysterious force suddenly sent Yi Xian and Amu out of the pawn shop. Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment Amu said, Let's go find her. Yi Xian nodded, and he looked around. Soon, he found the one-legged woman's position. Yi Xian took Amu and disappeared on the spot. Soon, the two arrived at the riverside, and the one-legged woman was still washing clothes. Yi Xian quickly walked to the one-legged woman's side, and snatched the clothes from her hands. Senior, how can you do this kind of rough work? Let me do it, let me do it. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian, and did not say a word. Amu looked at Yi Xian, who was trying to curry favor with her, and covered her mouth and smiled. The one-legged woman suddenly turned to look at Amu. What's the matter? She did not want to talk to Yi Xian. Amu nodded. I would like to ask for your help. The one-legged woman looked at Amu. Help with what? Yi Xian suddenly said. Send us on our way. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian. Shut up. Yi Xian. The one-legged woman turned to look at Amu, and Amu said, Please send us on our way. The one-legged woman said, Xiao Dao asked you to come? Amu nodded. The one-legged woman remained silent. Amu looked at the one-legged woman, and did not say a word. Yi Xian wanted to say something, but stopped. He finally understood. This one-legged woman and Xiao Dao did not welcome him. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand. When did he become so unpopular? At this moment the one-legged woman suddenly said, I'll send you there. Hearing this, Yi Xian was delighted, and he quickly put down the dress in his hands. At this moment, the one-legged woman suddenly turned to look at him. Wash it clean. Wash it clean. Yi Xian. An hour later, Yi Xian finally washed the one-legged woman's dress clean. The one-legged woman brought Yi Xian and Amu to the starry sky, and with a wave of her palm, a huge starship appeared in front of the three of them. Yi Xian looked at the one-legged woman. Miss, why don't you use the teleportation array? The one-legged woman was expressionless. There is no teleportation array. That place is a forbidden area, sealed by Tendo, and there is no teleportation array that leads there. Yi Xian pointed at the starship in front of him. Is it safe for us to take this? The one-legged woman said calmly. There's no other way even if it's not safe. Yi Xian wanted to ask something, but the one-legged woman suddenly said angrily, Why do you always have so many questions? Yi Xian. The one-legged woman directly boarded the starship with Amu, and seeing this, Yi Xian hurriedly followed. The one-legged woman waved her right hand, and the starship trembled violently, then disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. It was extremely fast. It was so fast that Yi Xian was a little surprised, because it was too fast. It was even faster than his sword kinesis. On the starship, the one-legged woman suddenly said, High Priest, that place is not simple. Are you really going to bring him there? Amu nodded. This is our last chance. The one-legged woman nodded slightly, and did not say anything else. Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. What kind of place is Mount Buzhou? Amu said softly, A relic, the last relic of the Tendo era. That place was once sealed by Tendo himself, not allowing outsiders to set foot in that place. Yi Xian blinked. Then will something happen if we go? Amu looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Probably not. Because you have a good fate with Tendo. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, Amu, you have another purpose for going to that place, right? Amu nodded. Yes. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and did not say anything else. Amu suddenly said, Why don't you ask me what my purpose is? Yi Xian smiled. You won't harm me, right? Amu looked at Yi Xian, and did not say anything. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Your goal is my goal." Hearing that, the corner of Amu's mouth lifted slightly. "Yes." At the side, the one-legged woman suddenly said, "Collusion." Yi Xian's face darkened. That did not seem to be the right word to use. At that moment, the one-legged woman glanced at Yi Xian again. "Snakes and rats in a nest." Yi Xian. At that moment, Amu suddenly turned her head, and in the depths of the distant starry sky, a huge silhouette of a heavenly dragon quietly appeared. Seeing this, Amu frowned. "It's here." Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian, 8th Division Heavenly Dragon. Chapter 1082. 8th Division Heavenly Dragon. Yi Xian looked up. The heavenly dragon was huge. Its head spanned across the entire star sector, and it emitted a formless aura. Heavenly Dragon Suppression. The strongest 8th Division Heavenly Dragon in the Heavenly Dragon tribe was the 8th Division Heavenly Dragon. It was also the only one. The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon looked down at Yi Xian and the other two. "High Priest, where are you going?" Amu blinked and smiled. "I'm going for a stroll." The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon suddenly laughed. "Stroll? High Priest, you sure have a lot of free time." As he spoke, he suddenly roared at the ground. Boom! A wave of dragon suppression swept down from the heads of Yi Xian and the other two. At that moment, the entire star sector was boiling. At the sight of that, Yi Xian put on a serious face. The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon was stronger than he had expected. Amu looked at the one-legged lady and the one-legged lady looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then, he stomped his right foot and transformed into a sword beam that shot up into the sky. Slash! In the starry sky, a snow-white sword beam slashed down and the dragon suppression was shattered by the sword. The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon looked down at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand. He looked at the 8th Division Heavenly Dragon without a hint of fear in his eyes. The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon suddenly disappeared. At that moment, a burly middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Xian. He transformed into a human. The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon looked at Yi Xian. "Human, is the meat of a heavenly dragon delicious?" Yi Xian smiled. "The taste is not bad." The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon nodded. "I will eat your meat bit by bit and let you watch me eat." "That feeling must be amazing." Yi Xian's lips curled into a disdainful smile. "Who do you think you are?" As soon as he finished his sentence, he suddenly disappeared. The 8th Division Heavenly Dragon punched out. Boom! This punch caused the entire starry sky to tremble. At that moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. Boom! Yi Xian was instantly sent back to his original position, while the 8th Division Heavenly Dragon retreated a few hundred feet. At the same time, there was a deep sword wound on his fist that was stained with blood. The 8th Group Heavenly Dragon looked at his fists and frowned. He was well aware of his physical body. In the Heavenly Clan, his physical body was definitely in the top 3. Not to mention the Tian clan, even in the entire God and Devil era, his body was second to none. He didn't expect that he would be injured by Yi Xian. The 8th Group Heavenly Dragon looked at the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand and squinted his eyes. "No wonder the Heavenly Dragon of my Heavenly Dragon race is no match for you. So it's because of this divine sword." As he spoke, he slowly clenched his right hand. Suddenly, a mysterious power appeared in the surrounding starry sky. This power gathered towards the 8th Division Spiritual Dragon like a tidal wave. Soon, an illusory dragon-shaped fist appeared above his head. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. What kind of mystique was this? At that moment, Amu's voice suddenly sounded. "This is the Heavenly Dragon Fist, the ultimate skill of the Heavenly Dragon race. Be careful." Yi Xian nodded. He didn't dare to be careless. His right hand gripped the executing heaven sword tightly. A powerful sword intent and power quietly gathered. At the same time, he suddenly disappeared from his spot. A cold light appeared in front of the 8th Group Heavenly Dragon. The 8th Group Heavenly Dragon narrowed his eyes and punched out. Boom! In an instant, the entire star domain turned illusory, unable to withstand the power of the punch. Rumble! The sword beam shattered and a figure was sent flying. It was Yi Xian. This flight covered a distance of several thousand feet. After Yi Xian stopped, he looked at the 8th Group Heavenly Dragon. At that moment, the 8-group heavenly dragon's expression was a little ugly. He realized that his punch had not caused any substantial damage to Yi Xian. The 8-group heavenly dragon stared at Yi Xian. You also have the indestructible golden body. Yi Xian patted his chest and smiled. Then, he suddenly disappeared from his spot. The next moment, a sword slashed down on the 8-group heavenly dragon's head. The 8-group heavenly dragon was expressionless as he raised his right arm to block. Boom! The executing heaven sword slashed the right arm, causing the 8-group heavenly dragon to retreat hundreds of feet away. There was a deep sword wound on his right arm, but it recovered in an instant. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. Amu suddenly said, "The 8-group heavenly dragon has the ability to heal himself. You can't kill him. He can't kill you either." Yi Xian fell silent. From the previous exchange, he could tell that he couldn't do anything to the 8-group heavenly dragon, and the other party couldn't do anything to him either. A fight between two indestructible golden bodies could only be described as boring. The 8-group heavenly dragon's expression turned ugly as he realized that he couldn't kill Yi Xian. If he wanted to fight to the death with Yi Xian, he would have to fight for at least 10 days and 10 nights. At this moment, Amu suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Yi Xian retreated back to the starship. At this moment, the 8-group heavenly dragon suddenly returned to his original form. Immediately after, he dived down from the sky and crashed into the starship. Amu looked at the one-legged lady. "Miss, let's go." Perhaps it was too late. Both her hands formed a strange hand seal as she chanted. All of a sudden, a mysterious force enveloped the starship. In an instant, the starship disappeared from the starry sky, while the 8-group heavenly dragon crashed into a lonely figure. Seeing the starship disappear, the 8-group heavenly dragon's expression turned grim. He turned to look. "Why didn't you make a move?" Unknowingly, a middle-aged man had appeared there. Hao Tian. Beside Hao Tian were Abzang and Gu Zhantian. Hao Tian looked into the distance and said softly, "Indestructible golden body. This person is indeed a monster." The 8-group heavenly dragon said in a low voice, "This person is not simple." Hao Tian laughed. "Of course he's not simple. This person has reached the indestructible golden body at such a young age. Even in our era, this talent is amazing. Other than that, this person's identity is even more extraordinary. In the past 2 days, I've already investigated this person. This person seems to have cheated his entire life, and there are countless experts behind him. Against this person, we can't be careless." Abzang suddenly said, "When will the God Teacher awaken?" God Teacher. Hearing this, the expressions of the few people present changed. Hao Tian shook his head. "I don't know for now." Abzang said softly, "The High Priestess sacrificed the Wu clan's awakening to allow her to wake up first. This move is really hard to understand. Also, this Yi Xian has great karma on him. If we make an enemy out of him, I'm afraid we'll be tainted with bad karma." Hao Tian fell silent. If the celestial God Teacher was here, they would know what to do. But now, the God Teacher had yet to awaken. Gu Zhantian suddenly interjected, "What karma does this have to do with him? This person has already joined the Wu clan, which means that he's an enemy of our heavenly clan. Not only that, this person has seized the supreme treasure of our clan. Are we just going to hand it over to him? In my opinion, why don't we act directly and kill him? And that High Priestess, without her, how will the Wu clan contend against our heavenly clan in the future?" Abzang shook his head. "I still feel that this matter isn't so simple. Firstly, everyone should have some understanding of the High Priestess. If she was so easy to kill, we wouldn't have waited until now. There must be a deeper meaning behind her choosing Yi Xian to be her shaman attendant. In my opinion, we should wait for the God Teacher to awaken before discussing what to do next." "That's not appropriate." Gu Zhantian abruptly shook his head. "At this moment, the experts of the Wu clan have yet to awaken. This is the best opportunity for us to kill Yi Xian and the High Priestess. If we miss this opportunity, the moment the experts of the Wu clan awaken, it would be too late even if we wanted to kill the High Priestess." Abzang shook his head again. "I feel that there must be a deeper meaning behind the High Priestess' actions. We should wait for the God Teacher to awaken." Gu Zhantian's Tendo spoke. "That High Priestess naturally isn't simple. However, Abzang, You must know that the experts of the Wu clan have yet to awaken. This is an extremely rare opportunity for us. If we lose this chance, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens if we want to eliminate the High Priestess in the future. Abzang turned his head and glanced at Hao Tian. What do you think? Hao Tian replied in a light voice. You guys have neglected one point. That is Yi Xian and Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao. Abzang and Gu Zhantian both fell silent. What they could be sure of was that Xiao Dao's strength was definitely above the three of them. Hao Tian spoke in a light voice. That woman is simply too mysterious. I'm afraid that only the God Teacher would know of her true identity. At this moment, Gu Zhantian suddenly interjected. No matter what, we have to make a decision now. Should we pursue this person or wait for the God Teacher to awaken? If we want to pursue this person, we have to act fast. With the three of us and the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon, even if the Xiao Dao acts, we will still be able to kill Yi Xian and the High Priestess. We should act now because it's obvious that Yi Xian and the High Priestess are going somewhere to seek protection. Abzang nodded. We have to make a decision. My suggestion is to wait for the God Teacher to awaken. Hao Tian fell silent, as though he was hesitating. At this moment, the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon suddenly spoke. Even if the God Teacher awakens, she will still choose to kill Yi Xian and the High Priestess. Everyone, don't forget that Yi Xian has already joined the Wu clan, becoming a shaman attendant of the High Priestess. Not only that, this person stewed a Heavenly Dragon of our Heavenly Dragon clan and stole the supreme treasure of our clan. Could it be that there's still a chance for us to reconcile with him? And now is the best time for us to kill him and the High Priestess. If we lose this opportunity and a single Wu clan expert awakens, it would be extremely difficult for us to eliminate them. Extremely difficult. Gu Zhantian nodded. We cannot miss this opportunity. Abzang wanted to say something but hesitated. It was undeniable that to the heavenly race, this was indeed a heavenly opportunity. Hao Tian suddenly spoke. Kill them then. As he spoke, he inclined his head and stared at the horizon. 8 groups Heavenly Dragon, detain them. Hearing this, the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon nodded. He was about to chase after Yi Xian's starship when suddenly, a woman appeared not far away from the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon. The woman had a petite figure and was clad in golden armor. She held a sword in her hand and exuded a heroic aura. The person who appeared was none other than Arrow. Seeing Arrow, the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Arrow looked at the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon expressionlessly. I'll stop you for a while. The 8 groups Heavenly Dragon's lips curled into a disdainful smile. With just you. Arrow suddenly slashed his sword across his throat. Chi! In the distance, the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon's body suddenly split open, and a stream of blood spurted out. P.S. I just want to hear some compliments. Chapter 1083. The expressions of Hao Tian and the other 2 instantly turned heavy when they saw this scene. As for the 8 Division Heavenly Dragon, the terror in his heart had reached the extreme. That sword strike had directly broken through his body. If that sword struck him again, he would die for sure. Hao Tian and the others stared fixedly at Arrow. Who exactly was this woman before them? At this moment, Hao Tian suddenly asked, Who are you? Arrow ignored Hao Tian. She turned and glanced at the starry sky before she spoke. That's enough. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and left. Hao Tian's eyes narrowed. Please provide me with your guidance. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Chi! The space behind Arrow suddenly split apart as a ray of golden light shot out. Arrow had no expression on his face as he slashed out with his sword. Bang! The ray of sword light instantly shattered, and Hao Tian had already returned to his original position. At this moment, the heaviness in his eyes grew even more intense. Arrow stared at Hao Tian. She suddenly opened her palm as her sword shot out like a bolt of lightning. In the distance, Hao Tian took a step forward and punched out with his fist. Resplendent golden light erupted forth from his fist, and within this golden light were countless strange golden runes. Rumble! Along with the sound of an explosion, the golden light suddenly exploded apart as the sword pierced straight towards Hao Tian. Hao Tian's eyes narrowed. He clenched his right fist as a golden shield made of runic symbols suddenly appeared before him. Boom! Arrow's sword was blocked. At this moment, Arrow opened her right palm and the sword returned to her hand. But in the next instant, the The sword shot out once more with a speed so fast that it caused the expressions of everyone here to change. Boom! The golden shield before Hao Tian instantly shattered. At the same time, Hao Tian retreated 100 meters back, and the space before him was directly transformed into nothingness. Suppression. Upon seeing this scene, the countenances of Abyekang and Gu Zhantian turned heavy once more. At this moment, other than the heaviness in Hao Tian's eyes, there was also a trace of fear. Arrow didn't attack again and turned to leave. Gu Zhantian was about to act when Hao Tian suddenly shook his head. Gu Zhantian glanced at Hao Tian. Hao Tian spoke in a light voice. She wants to stop us from chasing after Yi Xian. Don't be fooled, our target is Yi Xian. After saying that, they disappeared on the spot. Yi Xian. After being stopped by Arrow, Hao Tian was even more determined to kill Yi Xian. This person was too mysterious. If they didn't eliminate him now, he would become a great calamity for the Tian clan in the future. In the distant starry sky, Arrow suddenly stopped. She turned around and saw a woman standing there. Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao sized up Arrow and said with a smile, as expected of the undefeatable Arrow. Hao Tian is much weaker than you. Arrow looked at Xiao Dao. What's the matter? Other people might be afraid of Xiao Dao, but she wasn't. Naturally, she also didn't want to be enemies with Xiao Dao. After all, Xiao Dao had helped Yi Xian many times before. Xiao Dao laughed. Arrow, do you really want to interfere in his matters? Arrow had no expression on his face. Can't I? Xiao Dao shook her head. Naturally you can. It's just that, Arrow, I don't recommend you to interfere in his matters. Arrow stared at Xiao Dao. You are talking about the karma on him? Xiao Dao nodded. Arrow narrowed his eyes. What are you trying to say? Xiao Dao spoke in a light voice. Only when the Grand Priestess came looking for him did I discover that I have underestimated him. After speaking, she shook her head and laughed. Many people, including the Grand Priestess, felt that everything was within their calculations. But little did they know, they were already in the plans of others. What they thought was actually what others wanted them to think. Arrow suddenly exclaimed, Prophet! Xiao Dao nodded. Arrow looked at Xiao Dao. Are you sure the Prophet won't come back? Arrow nodded. He won't. First, he never thought of coming back. Doing so would mean sacrificing himself. Second, even if he wanted to come back, he wouldn't be able to. Arrow said. The plain-clothed woman. Xiao Dao nodded. Not just the plain-clothed woman. There are others as well. As she spoke, she suddenly looked at the far end of the starry sky. I discovered that the Prophet's chess game is very big. It's bigger than we expected. Arrow was silent for a moment. If he has a goal, why would he sacrifice himself like this? Wouldn't he be more powerful if he was alive? Xiao Dao smiled. That's true. But there is someone who won't give a damn about him. Arrow looked at Xiao Dao. The plain-clothed woman. Xiao Dao nodded. If I'm not wrong, what he wants to do must involve this plain-clothed woman. Arrow shook his head. That woman won't be schemed against by him. Xiao Dao looked at Arrow. That is when she is invincible. Hearing this, Arrow's pupils shrank. All of a sudden, she understood something. Xiao Dao suddenly said, Actually, it's not really a scheme. No one can control everything, calculate everything. Especially that woman. She has already severed her own karma. Arrow suddenly said, Can the fifth dimension tribulation kill her? Xiao Dao shook her head and smiled. What a joke. Arrow said in a deep voice, The Prophet's true goal isn't the fifth dimension tribulation. Xiao Dao shook her head again. No, his true goal is the fifth dimension tribulation. But what happens after the fifth dimension tribulation? Arrow looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao softly said, The fifth dimension tribulation is a tribulation of the human heart. There is an ancient saying, natural and man-made disasters. The fifth dimension tribulation is a natural and man-made disaster. At this point, she suddenly smiled and said, But, there is an even bigger man-made disaster. Arrow stared at Xiao Dao. Who are you? Xiao Dao smiled. You won't know me even if I tell you. Arrow was silent. Xiao Dao looked at Arrow. Arrow, I said so much to let you know that you don't need to worry about him. Whoever kills him will suffer 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Arrow was silent for a moment, then said, What does Tendo think? The little Taoist smiled and said, the heavenly Tao has already helped him many times. What do you think he thinks? Arrow nodded. I understand. Xiao Dao suddenly said, why don't you sever your karma with him? If you do so, your sword Dao will be even stronger. Arrow looked at Xiao Dao. If the plainly dressed woman severed her karma with him, what would happen? Xiao Dao was silent. Arrow said, if he treats me sincerely, I will treat him sincerely. With that, she turned to leave. As if thinking of something, she stopped and said, what about you? You can see through everything and know everything. What is the purpose of your existence? Xiao Dao was silent. Arrow said, it's fine if you don't tell me. With that, she walked away. At this time, Xiao Dao suddenly smiled. Actually, I just want to heal my injury. Arrow turned to look at Xiao Dao. After so many years of healing, you still haven't healed? Xiao Dao smiled. No. Arrow asked, why are you injured? Xiao Dao smiled. I fought with someone. Arrow looked at Xiao Dao. How much of your strength is now? The little Taoist blinked. Less than 10%. Hearing this, Arrow couldn't help but tighten his grip on the immortal sword. At the end of the starry sky, Yi Xian and the other two were on a starship, speeding through the vast Milky Way. On the starship, Yi Xian turned to look. He frowned. They didn't chase after us? Amu shook her head. Someone stopped them. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Who? Amu blinked. A woman with a sword. Arrow. Yi Xian's first thought was Arrow because it couldn't be the plain-dressed woman. If it was a plain-dressed woman, he wouldn't have stopped them, he would have killed them. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, is she in danger? Amu shook her head. No. Yi Xian relaxed a little when he had heard that. Amu suddenly said, how did you get to know so many powerful women? Yi Xian. From afar, the one-legged woman suddenly said, they're chasing after us again. Amu turned to take a look and nodded. Yes. Yi Xian's face darkened. He looked at the one-legged woman. How much longer until we reach Mount Buzhou? The one-legged woman looked into the distance. 1 more day's journey. 1 day. Yi Xian frowned. He turned to look at the end of the starry sky. Is it still that 8-division heavenly dragon? Amu shook her head. Other than him, there's Hao Tian from the Sky Race, Abzang from the Underworld, and Gu Zhantian from the Guxing Race. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. You can't beat any of them. Yi Xian. At this moment, Amu suddenly pinched her fingers. She silently chanted an incantation. Soon, the starship sped up again. This time, the speed was a little faster. It was so fast that the starship couldn't bear it anymore. The one-legged woman looked at Amu. At this speed, this starship will be incinerated in 4 hours. Amu nodded. I know. But if they catch up, it will disappear now. The one-legged woman said, 4 hours. Think of a way. Yi Xian suddenly said, let's fight them. Saying this, he looked at the one-legged woman. Senior, you fight 2, I'll fight 1. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Amu suddenly laughed. It's useless. Because we'll be the ones to die in the end. Saying this, she gave Yi Xian a look. Yi Xian understood. The one-legged woman was only sending them off. This matter had nothing to do with them. They couldn't drag them down with them. Otherwise, it would be too wicked. Yi Xian looked at Amu. You're so calm. You must have a way, right? Amu giggled. I have a way. But I need your help. Yi Xian asked, what help? Amu turned her head and said softly, provide me with mystic qi. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, what are you going to do? Amu said, set up the array. Saying this, she slowly closed her eyes. At the same time, she took out her staff and waved it quickly. Sorcerer God, help me. Hearing this, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. This was Xiao Dao's incantation? At this moment, the starry sky in front of little Taoist suddenly trembled. Then, countless black runes suddenly appeared out of thin air. These strange runes rapidly rotated, and in an instant, a mysterious rune net suddenly appeared in the entire starry sky. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao. What is this? Amu said,
The Wu clan's array.
Yi Xian said. Can it stop them? Amu shook her head.
No.
Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Then what's the use of this? Amu blinked. It's useless. I just think it's fun. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1084. Hearing Amu's words, Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Amu suddenly laughed. I'm just teasing you. As she spoke, she looked at the runes in the sky and said softly, This is an illusory array. Entering here is equivalent to entering the illusory array. This way they can buy us some time. Yi Xian nodded. Do you need spiritual energy now? Amu nodded slightly. Give me spiritual energy. I need to keep setting up the array. Yi Xian walked to Amu's side, placed his right hand on Amu's shoulder, and a stream of pure spiritual energy flowed into Amu's body. Amu set up the array again. Along the way, Amu set up countless illusory arrays, but after more than a market, the starship they were riding on had already begun to burn. At the same time, a powerful energy fluctuation came from the starry sky behind them. On the starship, Yi Xian held his sword, looking at the starry sky. At this moment, the rune arrays set up by Amu were rapidly disappearing. In the distance, the one-legged woman was expressionless, still controlling the starship to continue flying. Amu's expression was calm, but from time to time, her brows furrowed. No one knew what she was thinking. No matter what, he, Yi Xian, was ready to fight.
Amu suddenly turned to look at the one-legged woman. Miss, how much longer until we arrive?
The one-legged woman glanced into the distance. If you don't think of a way to stop them, we definitely won't be able to arrive. Amu was silent. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Let's stop here. The one-legged woman and Amu looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian looked at the one-legged woman smiling. Miss, let's stop here. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian. Are you sure? Yi Xian nodded, then he pointed to the right. You drive the starship this way. The one-legged woman narrowed her eyes. You want me to attract the firepower? Yi Xian flicked his finger, and 50 strands of pure purple energy fell in front of the one-legged woman. The one-legged woman glanced at the 50 strands of purple gas and didn't say anything. Yi Xian said, This is to thank Miss for sending me off. With that, he flicked his finger again, and 100 strands of violet energy landed in front of the one-legged woman. Miss, I don't know exactly how strong you are, but I know that those 3 people definitely can't kill you. Moreover, their target is not you, so when they discover that we are no longer on the starship, they will definitely not attack you. With a sweep of her right hand, the one-legged woman collected the 150 strands of purple gas. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Thank you. After that, he disappeared with a moo. The one-legged woman looked into the depths of the starry sky in the distance, then steered the starship in another direction. Soon, Hao Tian and the others appeared in the starry sky. Hao Tian glanced at the distant starry sky and was about to give chase when Abzang suddenly said, There's no more illusory formation in that direction. Hao Tian squinted his eyes. They didn't go that way. Abzang nodded. Hao Tian asked in a low voice, Where are they going exactly? Abzang glanced at the starry sky around him and slowly closed his eyes. A moment later, he suddenly opened his eyes. They're going to the Buzhou Divine Mountain. Buzhou Divine Mountain. The expressions of everyone here changed when they heard this. They were naturally familiar with this place. This was the last remnant of the Tendo era, and to those from the Fiend God era, it was a forbidden ground because it was sealed by Tendo. At this moment, Gu Zhantian suddenly spoke. Are they courting death? Abzang shook his head. There must be a deeper meaning to the high priest bringing that young man to that place. Gu Zhantian frowned. What deeper meaning? Abzang fell silent. Hao Tian suddenly spoke. The high priest is intelligent and full of schemes. There must be a reason for him to bring that young man to that place. Also, if they really go to that place, I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to kill them. Oh. They didn't dare to enter. The high priest dared to bring Yi Xian to the Buzhou Divine Mountain, but they didn't dare to enter. Tendo. That wasn't a joke. At this moment, Hao Tian suddenly spoke. Since they can go to the Buzhou Divine Mountain, why can't we? Abzang frowned. This is a little risky. Hao Tian glanced at Abzang. I don't know what the high priest wants to do, but I know that if we don't get rid of them now, we won't have any more chances in the future. Also,
The supreme treasures of our various races are in the hands of that Yi Xian. If he dies in the Buzhou Divine Mountain, what will happen to those treasures? Zhang fell silent. Hao Tian turned his head and stared in the direction of the Buzhou Divine Mountain as he spoke in a light voice. Those two must die. After speaking, he directly vanished into the depths of the starry space. Zhang, Gu Zhantian, and the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon also chased after him. Far away in the depths of the starry space, Yi Xian carried a mu on his back as he rode on his flying sword. With a mu's help, his speed was only slightly slower than the speeding up starship. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly spoke. Amu, why don't you enter the pagoda? Amu blinked his eyes. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Amu chuckled. It's comfortable to carry me on your back. Yi Xian. Amu gazed into the distance. Your plan is good, but you won't be able to fool them. Yi Xian fell silent. Amu laughed. This time, the Wu clan's experts have yet to awaken. This is the best opportunity for them to kill me. They will definitely not let go of this opportunity, unless that God-tier consolidating equipment master wakes up. Yi Xian frowned. If that God-tier consolidating equipment master wakes up, won't she kill you? Amu smiled. No, God-tier consolidating equipment master will kill me, but she won't kill you. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Amu blinked his eyes. Because she is also very smart. Not only will she not kill you, but she will also obtain you. Yi Xian was speechless. What was she talking about? Amu laughed. Unfortunately, God-tier consolidating equipment master hasn't woken up. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Miss Amu, why won't God-tier consolidating equipment master kill me? Amu blinked. Guess. Yi Xian shook his head. I won't guess. Amu smiled. Hao Tian and the others can only see the immediate benefits, but God-tier consolidating equipment master can see the future. She paused, then continued. No matter what, you must remember one thing, live well. Hearing this, Yi Xian frowned. Hey, why do you sound like you're saying your last words? Amu smiled, not speaking. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Amu, don't do anything stupid. We will definitely reach Buzhou Sacred Mountain. Amu was silent. Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He turned to look at Amu. Don't do anything stupid. Amu smiled. I won't. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Either we go to Buzhou Sacred Mountain together, or we die together. Amu blinked. Die together? Yi Xian nodded. I'm serious. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for me to live. Understand? Amu was silent. Yi Xian carried Amu on his back, disappeared into the horizon on his sword. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior 9th floor, do you have any ideas? They definitely couldn't fight. He and Amu definitely couldn't beat those people. After a moment of silence, 9th floor suddenly said, There's no way. Yi Xian, Amu suddenly said. In 15 minutes at most, they will catch up to us. Yi Xian turned to look. At this moment, he already felt a pressure. Although it was still very small, it was growing. Yi Xian's face darkened. Somewhere in the starry sky, a woman was watching Yi Xian, who was running for his life in the distance. This woman was Xiao Dao. At this moment, the one-legged woman appeared next to Xiao Dao. The one-legged woman looked into the distance. Why help me? The one-legged woman smiled. You're thin-skinned. If not for this, you would never have asked him for violet energy. The one-legged woman turned to look at Xiao Dao. Why help me? Xiao Dao smiled. You're a good person. The one-legged woman turned to Xiao Dao. He can't beat them. The little Taoist said calmly. That's his own business. The one-legged woman looked into the depths of space. What is in Mount Buzhou? Xiao Dao smiled. What do you think? The one-legged woman said softly. Tendo? Xiao Dao shook her head. Tendo is not there. The one-legged woman frowned. Then what is there? The one-legged woman smiled, did not speak. The one-legged woman looked at Xiao Dao. You really deserve a beating. Xiao Dao laughed. At this moment, she turned to look in the distance. She saw a few people. It was Hao Tian and the others. Seeing this scene, the one-legged woman frowned. She knew that Yi Xian and Xiao Dao had been caught. At the end of the distant starry sky, Yi Xian and Amu suddenly stopped. He turned to look. At this moment, Hao Tian and the others appeared in front of him and Amu. Hao Tian looked at Amu, smiled. High Priest, where are you going? Amu smiled. To Mount Buzhou. Hao Tian stared at Amu. Why are you going to Mount Buzhou? Amu blinked. Make a guess. Hao Tian shook his head. High Priest, you must understand, the Wu clan powerhouses have yet to awaken. Amu nodded. I know. Hao Tian looked at Amu. I'll ask you one last time, why are you going to Mount Buzhou? Amu smiled. I'm really just running for my life. Hao Tian looked at Amu, his right hand slowly clenched. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pulled Amu. Amu was about to speak, but he directly sent Amu into the prison pagoda within his body. At the same time, the prison pagoda was sealed. Within the prison pagoda, Amu was stunned. Looking at Hao Tian in the distance, Yi Xian said with a smile, Hi guys. Hao Tian looked at Yi Xian. You want to fight 1 against 3? Yi Xian shook his head. I can't win. Hao Tian smiled. We allow you to call for reinforcements. Yi Xian looked at Hao Tian. I want to fight 1-on-1. 1-on-1. Hao Tian suddenly smiled. I don't think there's a need because you can't beat me. Besides, I think there's no point in fighting 1-on-1. So you can either run now, or call for reinforcements. Yi Xian was silent. Hao Tian stared at Yi Xian. Are you sure you don't want to call for reinforcements? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Senior, if I fight the 3 of them, what are my chances of winning? Ninth floor said. 100%. Yi Xian was stunned. Really? Ninth floor said. In your dreams. Yi Xian. At this moment, Hao Tian suddenly smiled. Yi Xian, rumor has it that you have countless experts backing you. Now that I'm giving you a chance, are you sure you don't want to call for reinforcements? Yi Xian looked at Hao Tian. Do you really want me to call for reinforcements? Hao Tian stared at Yi Xian. If you don't, this god will look down on you. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I didn't want to call for reinforcements, but since you said so, I feel like I'm letting you down if I don't call for reinforcements. After saying that, he took out a black box. P.S. Let's hope the epidemic passes soon. Chapter 1085. It was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against an arrow in the dark. Hao Tian did this because he knew that it was impossible for him to kill Yi Xian and High Priest Amu so easily. Both of them had someone backing them. He hoped that the other party was in the open and not in the dark. This was because he could sense that there was an expert hiding in the dark who had yet to reveal himself. Yi Xian stared at the black box in front of him in silence. This was left for him by the little white fellow. What was inside? He had no idea. He only knew that when the little white fellow was angry, it would want to open the box. This box was definitely not simple. He had initially wanted to save this box for a crucial moment, but he had no choice but to use it now. After all, he really couldn't defeat these people in front of him. Yi Xian gently opened the box. A beam of black light floated out of the box. Soon, a black little girl suddenly appeared in the beam of black light. The little girl was dressed very strangely. She was wearing a shirt with an unknown monster printed on it. The shirt had no sleeves, and it was short, just above her arms. She was wearing a pair of blue skin-tight pants. These pants were a little special because there was a small hole on the knee of her right foot. It seemed like it was done on purpose. On the little girl's feet was a pair of human-shaped flip-flops. Her 2 jade-white feet were exposed to the air without any scruples. What was worth mentioning was that the little girl had a horn on her head and a tail on her back. Somewhere in the darkness, Xiao Dao stared at the little girl. No one knew what he was thinking about. The one-legged girl beside him suddenly asked, "Who is she?" Xiao Dao was expressionless. "Let me correct you. She is not human." The one-legged girl. From afar, Hao Tian and the rest were also staring at the little girl who had just appeared. Hao Tian, Abzang and Gu Zhantian didn't notice the expression on the 8th-division Heavenly Dragon's face. His eyes were filled with fear. Yi Xian was also staring at the little girl. He naturally knew who she was. This little girl was in cahoots with the little white fellow. The little girl yawned all of a sudden. Then she looked around. In the end, she laid her eyes on Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. "Hello." The little girl sized up Yi Xian and frowned slightly. "Why are you still so weak?" Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl looked around again. "Where's Bai?" "Little fellow." Yi Xian's eyelids twitched and he hurriedly said, "She left."
The little girl looked at Yi Xian. He left.
Yi Xian nodded.
Let's go.
The little girl shrugged.
Then I'm leaving too. With that, she turned around and left. Meanwhile, Yi Xian hurriedly stopped the little girl, and the little girl turned around to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Can you help me fight?" Fight. The little girl's eyes lit up, but soon, she shook her head. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The little girl pouted. Brother said not to always help you. You have to learn to face it yourself. Yi Xian blinked. Who's your brother? The little girl said, It's you. At this point, she suddenly stopped and did not speak. Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl looked at Yi Xian. Were you bullied?
Yi Xian nodded frantically.
Yes.
With that, he hurriedly pointed at Hao Tian and the others in the distance.
They bullied the weak. 4 against 1. The little girl turned to look at Hao Tian and the others. Then, she looked at Yi Xian. They're so weak. Can't you beat them? Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl suddenly said, Brother didn't let me help you fight. He said you have to grow on your own. I'm leaving. With that, she turned around and left. At this moment, Yi Xian hurriedly pulled her back. He took out a candied haw and handed it to the little girl. The little girl took the candied haw and blinked. What do you mean by this? I'm telling you, I can't be bought over with a candied haw. Yi Xian suddenly took out another candied haw and handed it to the little girl. The little girl kept the candied haw without batting an eyelid. Then she said, Are we just going to fight them? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. But, there are 4 of them. The little girl glanced at Hao Tian and the others. Then she said, Don't be afraid. With that, she walked towards Hao Tian and the others. Looking at the little girl walking over, Hao Tian was expressionless. Suddenly, he disappeared on the spot. In the distance, the little girl stopped in her tracks. She flew up and punched. Boom! With one punch, the starry sky was destroyed. The starry sky within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was destroyed in an instant. Countless stars were shattered. The entire star field turned pitch black. An enormous black hole had been born just like that. On the other hand, Hao Tian was blasted over 5,000 kilometers away. When he finally stopped moving, his body had split apart and blood sprayed out. This punch instantly stunned everyone here. Yi Xian was dumbstruck as well. How could this little girl be so strong? Is she even human? In the shadows, Xiao Dao's face was expressionless. On the other hand, the single-legged woman by her side had an extremely heavy expression on her face. The little girl's strength had greatly exceeded her expectations. The might of this punch was truly capable of destroying the heavens and the earth. Most importantly, it wasn't even her true body. As for Abzang, Gu Zhantian, and the 8 groups Heavenly Dragon, all of them had unprecedentedly heavy expressions on their faces. Moreover, there was even fear amidst that heaviness. As for Hao Tian himself, he was even more dumbstruck. A single punch. His body was blasted apart by a single punch. What sort of monster is this? The little girl peeled off a candied haw and licked it lightly. After that, she turned around and gazed at Xiao Dao. You're here as well. Yi Xian glanced at the path in the distance. Then he said, Do you know her? The little girl nodded. She had designs on Bai in the past. Yi Xian blinked. What do you mean? The little girl replied, She's a little bad. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Dao gazed at the little girl and remained silent. The little girl glanced at Xiao Dao. Do you want to fight? Xiao Dao's face remained expressionless. Up to you. Yi Xian's expression changed. He was just about to say something when the little girl suddenly smashed her fist forward. At the instant that her fist shot forward, a powerful force suddenly blasted Yi Xian over 10 kilometers away. Meanwhile, Xiao Dao took a step forward, and then he pressed his fingers together and tapped forward. At this moment, this expanse of the starry sky suddenly stopped moving. A finger tore through the starry sky and tore it apart layer by layer. In next to no time, a world-shaking explosion resounded like a thunderclap from within the pitch-black spatial black hole. Rumble! The stellar region which had been transformed into a black hole shook violently, and then it exploded apart. Yi Xian, Abzang, and the others were blasted backwards repeatedly.
The little girl suddenly put the candied haw away, and then her figure shot explosively towards Xiao Dao like a cannonball. Everywhere she passed was obliterated into nothingness. She'd truly vanished. All matter had vanished. Her strength was too formidable. Xiao Dao's face remained expressionless. Her eyes narrowed slightly when the little girl arrived in front of her, and then she clenched her right fist and smashed it forward. She was going head-on against it. Rumble! As soon as their fists collided, the entire stellar region suddenly fell silent as if it had been frozen. Suddenly, Xiao Dao's figure turned illusory, and then her fist smashed against the little girl's chest. Bang! The little girl's figure shook violently, but she didn't take a single step back. Conversely, Xiao Dao retreated by over 300 m. However, she didn't stop, and her figure turned illusory again. The little girl's eyes narrowed slightly, and then she turned around and swung her leg. Bang! A figure was blasted back. Meanwhile, the little girl suddenly frowned, and then she suddenly turned around. Meanwhile, a finger suddenly pressed against her throat. Bang! The little girl's figure shook, and then her figure instantly became slightly illusory. However, at practically the exact same moment, her fist smashed against Xiao Dao, who'd suddenly appeared in front of her. Bang! Xiao Dao instantly retreated by 3 kilometers. The little girl touched her throat, and there was a fingerprint there. She raised her head to look at Xiao Dao, and then she suddenly smashed her fist forward and roared furiously, "Shake the heavens and earth!" Her fist descended. Rumble! A destructive power suddenly swept across the field. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically at the sight of this power, and he retreated frantically. Hao Tian, Ab Zhang, and the others also retreated explosively. This force was truly too powerful. It was truly capable of destroying the world. In the distance, little Taoist narrowed her eyes. She stretched out her hands and pointed downwards. Then she slowly closed her eyes. When the powerful force was several thousand feet away from her, she suddenly opened her eyes and pointed out a finger. Destroy! A speck of black light appeared on the tip of her finger. Bang! Suddenly, a deafening explosion resounded, and then 2 figures retreated explosively. It was Xiao Dao and the little girl. Around 15 minutes later, the surroundings gradually calmed down, and Xiao Dao and the little girl returned to their original positions. Xiao Dao gazed at the little girl emotionlessly. The little girl took out a stick of candied hawthorn and started to lick it. Meanwhile, Yi Xian hurriedly appeared by the little girl's side. He glanced at Xiao Dao and said, "Are both of you all right?" Xiao Dao remained silent. The little girl said, "I'm fine." Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He couldn't figure out why the little girl wanted to hit Xiao Dao. The little girl gazed at Yi Xian. "I've used up all my energy. I'm going to vanish." Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl gazed at Xiao Dao. "I'll come find you in the future." Xiao Dao spoke indifferently. "I'll be waiting for you." The little girl licked the candied hawthorn, and her body grew more and more ethereal. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Do you know how to charge it?" "Charge it?" The little girl blinked. "How do you want to charge it?" Yi Xian hurriedly dragged number 9 out. Number 9. He'd never forgotten this woman. She was a woman who was very good at fighting. Her strength was a mystery as well. The little girl sized up number 9, and it didn't take long for her eyes to light up. Wow! She actually exists. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Do you know what she is?" The little girl nodded. "I do." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "How do I charge her?" The little girl sized up number 9 carefully, licked the candied hawthorn, and then looked at Yi Xian. "I observed her carefully. She doesn't have a charging port, so you might have bought a fake. I suggest you return it." Return it? Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1086. A refund. Yi Xian put on an odd expression when he had heard what the little girl had said. Meanwhile, the little girl gazed at Yi Xian. "Let's return it." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "I picked it up." "Picked it up?" The little girl blinked. "You didn't buy it." Yi Xian nodded. "I didn't buy it. Help me see how I should charge it." The little girl sized up number 9 once more, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. "How's her IQ?" Yi Xian said, "Very, very high, and she's very strong." The little girl said softly, It should be a solar charger. Solar. Yi Xian blinked. What do you mean? The little girl said, it's a solar charger. Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl glanced at the surroundings. It was pitch black without a trace of sunlight. The little girl said, take her to bask in the sun. Yi Xian nodded. That's the only way. The little girl licked the candied fruit, and then she passed it to Yi Xian. Keep it for me. I'll ask for it from you next time. As soon as she finished speaking, her body became completely ethereal, and it didn't take long for her to vanish. Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl had left. Yi Xian gazed at number 9, and then he glanced at the surroundings. I have to find some time to bask her in the sun. As if he'd thought of something, he turned around to look at where Hao Tian and the others were. They hadn't left. Hao Tian's body had been destroyed. Yi Xian gazed at Hao Tian whose body had been destroyed, and he chuckled. You asked me to call for help. Hee hee. As soon as he finished speaking, he put number 9 away, turned around, and ran. Hao Tian's expression was extremely unsightly. Of course, there was even more fear and terror on his face. The little girl that Yi Xian called out just now was truly heaven-defying. He didn't dare to chase after Yi Xian. He really didn't dare. A moment later Hao Tian suddenly said, Go back. With that, he turned around and left. On the battlefield, Abyakang, Gu Zhantian and the 8th Division Heavenly Dragon vanished as well. Xiao Dao and the one-legged woman were still there. The one-legged woman looked at Xiao Dao. What kind of monster is she? Xiao Dao said calmly, Evil beasts. The one-legged woman frowned. Exalted goddess? Xiao Dao shook his head. No. As she spoke, she looked into the distance with a complicated expression. The ancestor of evil beasts. After a moment of silence, the one-legged woman said, I'm afraid the Tian clan won't dare to cause trouble for him anymore. Xiao Dao shook his head slightly. It depends on the priest's attitude. If she wants to target us, the Tian clan will not hesitate to pay the price. The one-legged woman asked, Will she? I wonder what that woman is thinking. Xiao Dao said softly. The one-legged woman fell silent. In the distance, Yi Xian was sprinting madly. When he confirmed that Hao Tian and the others weren't chasing after him, he heaved a sigh of relief. After that, he released a moo. A moo looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said softly, Are you angry? A moo shook his head. You did it to protect me. Why would I be angry? However, don't do this again. If there's anything, I will face it together with you. Yi Xian nodded. All right. A moo looked at Yi Xian. It's a promise. Yi Xian said seriously, It's a promise. A moo smiled and said, That girl just now left. Is she gone? Yi Xian nodded. She left. I wonder when I can see her again. A moo said softly, She is very light. That Xiao Dao is very strong too. Xiao Dao. At this moment, he suddenly remembered something, and that was little Daoist. While he was shocked by the girl's strength, he almost forgot about Xiao Dao. This Xiao Dao was also very terrifying. He was evenly matched with that girl. Who was Xiao Dao? This was also a mystery. A moo suddenly said, Let's go to Mount Buzhou. Yi Xian looked at a moo. We're still going? I think the Celestials wouldn't dare to find us now. A moo smiled. Let's go. Yi Xian looked at a moo. What's your goal? A moo smiled. You'll know when we get there. Yi Xian nodded. All right. At this moment, Xiao Ling suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Just as he was about to speak, Xiao Ling pulled him into the prison pagoda. A moo hurriedly followed them into the prison pagoda. Xiao Ling brought Yi Xian and a moo to the 3rd floor. On the 3rd floor, Yi Xian saw the heaven-warring beast. At this moment, this heaven-warring beast was at least several times bigger than before. At the same time, its body exuded a terrifying pressure. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ling. Xiao Ling looked at the heaven-warring beast. It seems to have grown up. Yi Xian nodded. I can see that. Xiao Ling said again. I just gave it some pills then. At this point, she stopped abruptly. Yi Xian asked. Then what? Xiao Ling walked behind the heaven-warring beast. She grabbed its long tail and dragged it in front of Yi Xian. Xiao Ling pointed at the heaven-warring beast. It ate all the spirit fruits. And it still wants to eat them. I don't know how to raise it. Yi Xian. The heaven-warring beast lay on the ground shivering. At this moment, a moo suddenly said, "It is going to evolve." Yi Xian looked at a moo. A moo said softly, "After it received the help of that little girl, it has broken through its bloodline. Now it is in a very critical period. If it has enough spirit qi, it will evolve and completely surpass its ancestor." "Spirit qi," Yi Xian said in a deep voice. "How much spirit qi?" A moo blinked. "I don't know. But the more the better, because the more it has, the more powerful it is." Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ling spread her hands. "It has eaten all the fruits and pills." With that, she gently kicked the heaven-warring beast with her little foot. "What a foodie!" The heaven-warring beast lay on the ground and gently rubbed against Xiao trying to please her. Xiao was a little helpless. Then she looked at Yi Xian. "What should we do? It will eat us poor." At this time, the heaven-warring beast hurriedly ran to Yi Xian's feet and gently rubbed against Yi Xian's feet. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "I'll think of a way." A moo looked at Yi Xian. "What way?" Yi Xian glanced at the heaven-warring beast in front of him, then looked at a moo. "Can the Wu clan afford to raise it?" A moo blinked. "This." Yi Xian looked at a moo. "It is ours, and also the Wu clan's." After a moment of silence, a moo said, "Raise it." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression suddenly relaxed. Although he was very rich, he still underestimated this heaven-warring beast. This guy really could eat. It should be known that Xiao had saved countless spirit fruits and spirit items. But they were all eaten by this heaven-warring beast. A moo looked at the heaven-warring beast. If it is allowed to advance, it will become very powerful, but it really can eat. At this time, the heaven-warring beast suddenly stood up. It waved its fists as if to express something. At this time, Xiao suddenly said, "It said it can fight very well when it grows up." Yi Xian was speechless. A moo suddenly said, "How about this? When I return from Mount Buzhou, we will bring you to the Wu clan. At that time, you can eat to your heart's content." The heaven-warring beast hurriedly nodded. A moo smiled slightly, then looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Yi Xian nodded, then left the prison pagoda with a moo. Inside the pagoda, Xiao looked at the heaven-warring beast and sighed. "Eat less." Heaven-warring beast. Outside, Yi Xian was flying on his sword, and a moo was right beside him. Yi Xian looked into the distance. "A moo, I heard you say that Mount Buzhou is the last remnant of the Tendo era?" A moo nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Even Tendo can't avoid the fifth dimension tribulation?" A moo said softly, "I don't know. I only know that she is very mysterious and very powerful. If it weren't for you, I definitely wouldn't have come to Mount Buzhou." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Why?" A moo chuckled. "Because she won't harm you. If you come here, she might give you some face. If I came alone, she definitely wouldn't give me face." Yi Xian was a little curious. "A moo, why are you going to Mount Buzhou? I'm really curious." A moo blinked. "You'll know when the time comes." Yi Xian shook his head. "All right." A moo turned his head and looked, then said, "After this time, the Tian clan will definitely restrain themselves." Yi Xian smiled. "I hope so." A moo looked at Yi Xian, wanting to say something but hesitating. Yi Xian said softly, "A moo, what do you want to say?" A moo was silent for a moment, then said, "By now, you should already know that your identity is a bit special, right?" Yi Xian nodded. A moo looked at Yi Xian. "You seem safe, but in reality, danger lurks everywhere. Your current strength is far from enough to deal with these dangers. As for that woman in the plain dress, I've thought about it for the past few days. There must be a deeper meaning to her not coming to the fifth dimension. And to be able to delay her footsteps, it is definitely not an ordinary person or matter. The people behind you are each stronger than the last, but this also means that in the future, your opponents will definitely be extremely strong." Yi Xian frowned. "Future opponents?" A moo looked at Yi Xian. "All the eras are converging, and the fifth dimension tribulation is about to arrive.
Haven't you noticed that something big is about to happen?
Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Is it just the fifth dimension tribulation? Amu shook her head. It's definitely not just the fifth dimension tribulation. As she spoke, she turned to look at the distant depths of the starry sky. Her eyes were filled with deep worry. Yi Xian asked, Amu, did you discover something? Amu shook her head and smiled, not saying anything. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this time, Amu suddenly raised her head and looked into the distance. We've arrived. Yi Xian looked into the distance. In the depths of the starry sky, he could vaguely see a huge mountain. That huge mountain stood in the middle of the starry sky. Around that huge mountain, there were countless smaller mountains. In that area, dark clouds covered the sky, and the light was extremely dim. It gave people an invisible feeling of oppression. In addition, Yi Xian also discovered that on top of that Buzhou sacred mountain, there was a huge sleeping dragon. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Amu said softly, This is Buzhou sacred mountain. P.S. Being too handsome is too troublesome. You can't understand.